Story 1.
My wife cheated, stole my car, and tried taking my kids, but karma caught up and destroyed her life. I've always aimed to do what's right, following the simple idea, treat others the way you want to be treated. These are the principles I try to live by, and I've made an effort to stick to them. Yet, even though I never meant to hurt anyone, I spoke harshly or avoided responsibility for my mistakes. Leading a good life turns out to be surprisingly tough. In summary, I consistently choose the morally upright path. When faced with challenges, I present facts in a friendly manner when addressing others' errors and acknowledge my own faults. Despite my dedication to these values, a major life event took me by surprise. I was just going about my life, unaware of any warning signs when it happened. Update: returning from a 2-day conference in Texas, I was met with a surprise from my wife in the kitchen. Casey and our kids were laughing. When I inquired about the source of their amusement, the atmosphere shifted. Casey didn't ask, she told me to sit down. She suggested that I take a seat and wave some papers in my face. There were adoption papers among them, and she explained that she wanted Jeff to adopt the kids. Assertively, she stated that she wasn't asking for anything except the house. According to Casey, I should sign the papers because she believed I wanted the best for the children, and then we could move on. She said all this in a cool and composed manner. My wife of 12 years had just handed me divorce papers and adoption forms for our 3 kids. My son Devin gave me a little smirk. Devin was 10. Joy, my daughter, didn't even bother looking at me. She was 9 and busy with her iPod, not bothered about losing her father. Patrick, my 7-year-old, was the only one speaking up. Patrick explained that Jeff had a big house and that they liked him, as if that would make everything okay. I just sat there, looking at Casey and the kids like they were crazy. I wondered if she was high or drunk, but there was no drink smell. So why this sudden divorce? Casey dropped the papers on the counter and gave me a check for half our bank accounts, demanding the kids take my bags to my truck. Unbelievable. They had packed my bags before I got home and waited for the right moment to spring it on me. I asked Casey, with a slightly menacing tone, if she thought I was going somewhere. She replied that I was moving out and asked if I hadn't been listening. I retorted, saying that this is my family's house. My parents said I could live here long before we got married. I didn't recall her name being on anything tied to this house. I didn't know why she wanted a divorce, but she wasn't taking my parents' house. I shouted that she could leave, but I was staying in this house. Casey rolled her eyes and, realizing she couldn't win, changed her orders and yelled at the kids to pack their bags. They had to change their plans and go to Jeff's house. I finally asked who in. The heck Jeff was, and Casey responded that he was the man who's been with her while I'm at work. She wasn't guilty or remorseful. Casey showed nothing but disrespect and contempt for me. I looked at my kids for support, and my daughter told her brothers to hurry up, stating that Jeff could give them a better life. She added that Mom loves him, and so do we. My sons nodded in agreement. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. They all headed toward Casey's car. I told Casey not to touch that car, explaining that I pay for it, and it's in my name. I instructed my son to call his sorry pals and tell them to pick all of them up. Casey and the kids looked back at me, and all of them, the kids as well as Casey, flipped me the bird. I was beyond angry. I had worked for this family and they ditched me for some money. I did what any normal man would do. I got really drunk. For the first time in my life, I hated somebody. I hated this Jeff guy with a passion, but more than him, I hated my family. I realized that it wasn't all him. My so-called family had chosen to betray me. Once I had sobered up the next morning, I cleaned myself up and went online to find a lawyer. I made an appointment for the next day at noon. They love him so much, I decided to give them what they asked for. My attorney looked over the agreement and told me to sign it before Casey changed her mind. I signed it and my lawyer sent it back. Casey didn't even ask for child support. In the blink of an eye, with the stroke of a pen, I no longer had a wife or kids. My family tossed me aside like old bread. So much for staying together until the kids leave or growing old together. Update: 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Like everything else, I changed over time. I threw myself into work, returned to college, and earned my master's and PhD. Now I was Dr. Billy, PhD, CPA. Many find accounting dull, but it somehow matched my life. I chose to start my own office, a boutique operation catering to high-net-worth clients with personalized attention. Through word of mouth, my client base grew, and by the end of my 2nd year, I was saving a significant amount. I met Patty, a wonderful woman who shared my values and interests, a bit taller than Casey with curves in the right places. By the end of the 4th year, my firm needed more space, so I bought a 5-story office building instead of renting. Patty, and I loved it so much that we got married on the 4th floor, a small but festive event. Perhaps I enjoyed myself too much, because a few months later, Patty revealed she was pregnant. I wished for more alone time with my wife, as my life had been improving over the last 6 years. However, I was shocked when Casey served me with child support papers asking for $3,000 a month and $432,000 in back child support. It seemed absurd since I hadn't heard from them in 7 years. I laughed and handed the papers to my attorney. After a good laugh, my attorney called Casey's attorney. Discovering Casey was broke and alone, she had learned about my success, remarriage, and growing family. Casey's husband, Jeff, disappeared, and a week later, she was served with divorce papers. Jeff refused to pay child support, claiming coercion by Casey to sign adoption forms. The judge declared the adoptions void. With their divorce finalized and money gone, I became Casey's next option. Casey involved my parents, who had stayed in touch with her since she left me. They sided with her without telling me about their contact. Casey played the actress, and my parents believed her story. My dad was the first to talk to me, urging forgiveness and family reunification. I reminded him of my remarriage, and my father suggested fixing my marriage to Casey, leaving Patty, and taking care of the kids. I lost respect for him and asked him to leave. My mom made a similar request. They insisted that if I didn't take Casey back, I could move out, and they would give her the house. Despite an eviction notice, I didn't mind, as the sale on my new house was closing the next day. Remarkably, when paying cash, people go the extra mile to get things done. Update: the next week, my parents came to the house and found it empty. Casey and her kids moved in the following day. It's been 2 years since then, and I haven't talked to my parents, Casey, or her kids. Patty and I now have 4 kids, and our business is thriving. This year, I received the Businessman of the Year award for our area. A wonderful photo of me and my family appeared in the local paper. Proudly, I accepted the award and credited Patty for most of it. I told the audience that without my wife Patty, there would be no award for me. She is my rock. While delivering my speech, my parents walked in with Casey. Casey approached the stage and called me a neglectful father. She told everyone that I abandoned my kids and her, blaming Patty for ruining our marriage. I believe my attorney anticipated this. He seemed to have a sense that Casey would use this event to attack me and promote her false story. He used a remote to control a projector at the side of the hall. Private investigators are quite resourceful in uncovering hidden details and using advanced technology. It was astonishing. A film started playing on the blank wall, showing Casey and her attorney discussing revoking the adoption papers I had signed in the parking lot outside his office. She informed her lawyer that the court voiding them would be more beneficial than what she had given him that afternoon. They also discussed a plan to medicate Patty and film her cheating on me. Then, Casey would come in and mend my broken heart. She also revealed how she manipulated my parents to be her puppets, threatening that they wouldn't see their grandkids if they didn't comply. When the short video ended, Casey's attorney, Finch, tried to leave quietly through a side door but was stopped by the chief of police. Some judges in the audience took an interest in the tape. I glanced at my parents, then walked over to my wife and kids, helped them with their coats, and left. Outside, I kissed Patty, and we headed for the car. Just as I finished putting the kids in the car, my parents called my name. I got in my car without looking back and drove away. I didn't see them again until I was called to court to testify against Casey and her lawyer. After giving my testimony, I left the courtroom. My father was waiting outside. My father expressed how sorry he and my mother were and asked me to give them a chance to make things up. He mentioned the 3 kids who missed me and the 4 grandkids they had never met. My father urged me to find it in my heart to forgive them and put the family back together. I just looked and turned away. After a moment, I stopped and told him I would think about it. Update: Casey received a 3-month jail sentence and 4 years of probation. Her lawyer was disbarred for conspiring to commit fraud against the court and me. The Child Welfare Department warned that the kids would go to foster care unless my parents or I took them. I asked my parents to take them. My dad said I'd have to forgive them someday. My dad questioned if wanting to be part of the grandkids' lives was so terrible, emphasizing that they were old and would miss most of their lives. He asked if I was heartless, unable to see that she made a mistake. I explained that there's nothing wrong with wanting to be in their lives, but Casey wasn't just mistaken, she was cold-hearted and got what she deserved. The kids chose him. I reminded him of his past words, saying that some things can't be forgiven, and he also mentioned the road to hell being paved with good intentions. I pointed out that he turned his back on me when Casey lied, cheated, and turned the kids against me, and he still sided with her. Now he wanted me to act like nothing had changed. I told him that he's old enough to know he made the wrong choice, and now he has to live with the consequences. That was a decade ago. Casey didn't learn her lesson. She married again and attempted the same deceit as she did with me, but it didn't end well. Her husband caught her with her lover and kicked them both. My kids with Casey are grown. Devin and Patrick are in prison. Joy, before anything went wrong, came to our house seeking to be part of our family. Patty believed Joy had been misled by her mother and insisted we take her in to help her live a moral and productive life. My parents met my kids before they passed away, leaving everything to my judgment. They asked me to distribute their assets fairly among their 7 grandchildren. In my will, Patty and I will soon be empty nesters, and I'll cherish having my wife back all to myself. For some, Billy is seen as weak for not fighting to keep his family or for walking away. Some things just aren't worth the fight. My name is Rick, and during high school and college, people often thought of me as a computer geek. While I'm not the best-looking guy, I stand at 6 feet tall, weigh around 170 lbs, and have light brown hair. I've always been into computers, programs, and games, and anyone with computer troubles usually came to me for help. That's how I met Karen, who eventually became my wife 7 years ago. We were both students at the University of Wisconsin. Karen studied ABA legal studies while I focused on computer science. She aspired to be a corporate lawyer, and I aimed to delve deeper into computers and programs. When Karen struggled with her computer system, a professor from the computer science department referred her to me. I helped her grasp the system, and we not only became efficient collaborators but also good friends, spending a lot of time together. Now, let me introduce Karen. She's an attractive 4 Hungarian forints and tall blonde with a stunning 36 to 24-36 figure. She's not just good-looking, she also has a fantastic personality and easily connects with everyone. I genuinely liked her, and over time, I fell deeply in love with her. Karen, in turn, got to know me and fell in love with me too. It might sound surprising, but stranger things have happened, although I can't think of any right now. Update. After 2 years in school, Karen realized she wouldn't achieve her goal of becoming an attorney. However, she remained interested in legal work and applied for jobs as a legal secretary. She landed a position with a major brokerage firm and quickly adapted to the job. We got married within 2 months, and she continued working to support us while I finished school. Over the last 5 years, her hard work, dedication, and friendliness helped her climb the corporate ladder. She was eventually transferred to the Chicago headquarters to be the assistant to the manager of the firm's legal department. I earned a degree in computer science and decided to make a good living by writing computer game programs, starting my own business. I've created numerous popular games that you or your kids would recognize. I've made a substantial amount of money and no longer need to work as hard. We moved to Highland Park, a suburb of Chicago along Lake Michigan. Since we were both successful in our work, Karen and I have built a comfortable life together, working because we enjoy it, not out of necessity. To avoid getting bored, I secretly started another company in Milwaukee, about an hour's commute, investigating computer software fraud. CSFI Inc. Through confidential contacts at the Institute of Computer Technology, I began with a small client list that has continued to grow through word-of-mouth advertising. CSFI Inc. now has about 150 clients and might be working on 5 or 6 projects at any given time, generating profits exceeding $3 million last year. I hired a competent office manager, Carrie, and contracted computer experts like myself for investigation work. We rotate them on projects so they don't become too familiar to the customer. The only actual employees of the company are Carrie, me, and the investigators. Each gets paid a percentage of the fee for the projects they do for me. Due to the huge profits in the software industry, the need for confidentiality and secrecy is extreme, so I've always maintained anonymity. In fact, no one at the company knows me, not even Carrie, because I always wear a disguise to hide my true identity when I investigate. I even wore a disguise when I hired Carrie to keep my involvement a secret. Over the years, I've become adept at developing new disguises to fool everyone. When I investigate a case, I get paid like the rest of the investigation staff, except my pay goes to a separate account I've set up under an alias. The majority of the investigations are done by my contracted staff, but about once a quarter, I take on a job myself for fun. Karen is unaware of CSFI Inc., so I use the pretext of going to Milwaukee to meet with my game distributor to get away for a few days to do the investigation. Actually, all of my computer game business is done through the internet. For CSFI Inc., though, I drive to the company's apartment in Milwaukee, park my car in the garage, put on my disguises, and then drive a company car, currently a Buick, to the office to pick up the investigation materials. I go wherever I need to do the job, sometimes local but sometimes in New York or California. I finish the job, go back to Milwaukee, reverse the process, and go home. You might be thinking that while I'm traveling, I'm cheating, taking every opportunity to date women and cheat on my wife. But nothing could be further from the truth. I love my wife beyond my own understanding and would never do anything to hurt her or my marriage. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for Karen, and that's why I'm writing this story. I personally took on an investigation for Marcos Software to determine if one of their programmers was selling source code to a competitor. Jeff Marcos designed a program to track securities transactions, and I thought it would give me insight into Karen's work, so I jumped on that investigation myself. The company is in Oak Brook, another suburb of Chicago. I thought it might be fun to explore restaurants and clubs in my hometown while in disguise. Who knew? Maybe I would encounter some friends I could toy with. Little did I know what I would be really encountering and what I would be investigating. I had all the information needed from Carrie, my office manager, and I set myself up in the Drake Hotel in Oak Brook, a short drive from Marcos Software. I arrived at Marcos and, after a short wait, was greeted by Jeff Marcos. He was tall, dark, and handsome, a replica of the traditional pattern for a man that women would find attractive. Jeff was also very outgoing and friendly and had a presence about him that put me at ease. I really found myself liking the man. He invited me into his office and talked to me about what he suspected and how he thought I might approach the investigation. He set me up with everything I needed right there in his office and told all his people that I was a special projects manager with one of their customers, there to work out the bugs on the program application with my company. I thought it would work out quite well, so we went with that approach. Update: on the second day of my stay, I confirmed Jeff's suspicions. One of his team members, a programmer named Tom, was indeed selling source code, and I found out exactly how he was doing it. While I was working on my report, Jeff's cell phone rang, which was placed on his desk next to me. Jeff wasn't in the room, so I glanced at the caller ID and was shocked to see Karen, my wife's cell phone number. Initially, I thought about grabbing the phone to surprise her, thinking her company might be using Jeff's software and imagining her shock upon discovering I was working there. However, I realized it would jeopardize keeping CSFI Inc. and my identity a secret. Instead, I chuckled to myself about the irony of the situation. Jeff returned and called my wife back. My amusement turned into heartbreak and sickness when I overheard him say, "Karen, I'm glad you called. I had a wonderful time last night. Can we meet at Morton's for dinner at 6:30 p.m.? Okay, I'll see you there, and afterward we'll go to your place for dessert. Bye, beauty." I was stunned, feeling like I could be knocked out of my chair with a feather. I must have looked like a zombie, and the shock made me feel nauseous. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might have a heart attack. I excused myself, went to the men's room, and sat in the stall until my heart settled, trying to comprehend how Karen could do this. I thought she loved me as much as I loved her, yet here she was, planning to meet Jeff again. He spoke of enjoying the previous night, and the things he said hinted at a level of intimacy that went far beyond what you'd say to someone, unless you'd been deeply involved. I couldn't fathom it. I had no inkling that Karen had been cheating on me. Our closeness and life together seemed satisfying, and she had never complained about unmet needs. I was utterly bewildered and couldn't comprehend what was happening, and throughout all of this my heart was breaking. How could she betray me, someone she supposedly loved? Did she love me at all? Was my marriage genuine, or was it just a facade? I genuinely felt like my world was collapsing at that moment. Everything I had worked for, everything I had envisioned for Karen and me, was now shrouded in uncertainty. Once I calmed down enough to think clearly, I decided I needed to confirm my suspicions instead of relying on the limited evidence I had overheard. Once I gathered all the facts, or as many as possible, I planned to take action. I returned to Jeff's office and focused on finishing the project, knowing that I would dedicate the next few days to uncovering the truth. Sitting there was challenging because I wanted to confront him, but I understood that it would be a mistake to escalate matters without preparation. Jeff had a big grin on his face and, as if reading my mind, said, "I hope I didn't offend you earlier with my comment about the woman on the phone. She's really something special. I met her a few weeks ago at a customer's office and we hit it off. At that moment, I despised him, but I could see why Karen might be interested. Jeff was charming, confident, and smooth, qualities that probably appealed to her." He continued, "She told me that the next time her husband, she calls him Computer Boy, leaves town for business, she'll call me and we'll meet up again. Although it hurt, I held it together." Jeff laughed and added, "She said she married Computer Boy because she knew he'd become rich, providing her with a comfortable life while she could still have affairs with attractive men like me." He laughed again, and I questioned her love for me. Jeff's words confirmed that Karen had been unfaithful not only physically but emotionally. She had mocked me, disrespected me, and reduced me to a means to an end. I remained calm and composed, though it took everything in me not to explode. I couldn't believe the information I had just gathered from Jeff, all without revealing my identity or intentions. It became crystal clear that it was indeed my Karen, especially with the Computer Boy reference. It seemed evident that she had cheated on me with Jeff and possibly others throughout our marriage. While I now knew a lot, I needed more proof before executing a plan. I informed Jeff that I needed to leave for the rest of the day and would return the following morning. In my car, I called Karen on my cell phone. She acted sweet and loving, expressing how much she missed me. Her words made me nauseous, knowing what I knew. I asked about her plans for the day, and she mentioned working late and possibly having dinner with friends. I informed her that I'd be gone for another day or two and said I would call her later. She insisted I not call because she didn't know when she would be home from her evening out with friends. In reality, she just didn't want any interruptions while being with Jeff. I felt sick to my stomach. Update, I felt the need to catch her in the act and knew exactly how to do it. On my way home, I went to an electronics store and purchased 5 new mini wireless surveillance cameras and a modem. This setup would allow me to monitor various areas in the house: the kitchen, living room, family room, master bedroom, and guest bedroom. I wasn't sure where she would take him, but I wanted to cover any possible location. When I got home, I used the remote to turn off the security camera, parked my car in the garage to avoid suspicion, entered the house, and rewound the tape to erase any evidence of my arrival. I installed the surveillance cameras, connected them to the modem and recorder in my basement workshop, and ensured I could access the output. Online. Satisfied with my setup, I left the house, got into my car, and drove away. I drove around the block and reactivated the security cameras with the remote. Unless Karen scrutinized the security tape closely and noticed the time break, she wouldn't realize anything had happened. Besides, Karen never bothered checking the tapes. That was always my responsibility. After completing the setup, I felt hungry and went to a nearby pizza place to eat. I had a couple of beers but stopped myself from drinking more, wanting to stay sharp. Later, I went to the hotel, set up my computer, and waited. Despite my hopes that it was all a mistake and she wasn't cheating, my emotions overwhelmed me, and I broke down in tears. Around 8 p.m., I saw her car pull into the garage, and it was clear she was alone. My heart skipped a beat, thinking maybe nothing was going to happen. However, a couple of minutes later, the security camera was turned off, and I couldn't see the driveway anymore. Switching to the kitchen camera, I witnessed her entering, dressed in one of my favorite outfits, a short black dress, rather low cut, with spaghetti straps. I loved seeing her in that outfit, until that very moment. I knew she wouldn't wear it to go out with friends for dinner. She wore it to entice someone, usually me. But tonight, it wasn't me. Tears streamed down my face again as I realized this wasn't a mistake. Karen was not who or what I thought she was. I didn't have to wait long for Jeff to enter the kitchen. Apparently, Karen left the garage door open, and he parked his car in my spot to avoid the neighbors seeing it. When he walked in, Karen embraced him, and they shared a kiss while he rubbed her back. She suggested moving to the bedroom. They grabbed a bottle of wine and 2 glasses and left the kitchen. I switched to the living room camera and saw them pass on their way to the bedrooms. Strangely, I hoped she would choose the guest room over our bed, though I knew it was a ridiculous thought. However, that wasn't the case. When I switched to the guest room camera, nothing was there. Switching to our bedroom, they were sitting on the bed, kissing. Karen opened the wine, poured each of them a glass, and toasted to a handsome man and great closeness. They drank half the glass and set them down. Jeff stood up and Karen opened his pants. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. I wasn't turned on, and I didn't want it to happen. If it seemed like the first time, I would have stopped it, but there were signs it wasn't. I needed proof before deciding what to do. Everything I feared happened. Karen praised their encounter and suggested doing it again tomorrow night. My heart broke when she expressed that she might not let me be her bad life with her again. Until that moment, I thought she loved me and just wanted more closeness. I hoped confronting her would make her stop out of love for me. But with that comment, I realized she didn't love or respect me. I knew. Our marriage was over because I couldn't live with someone who didn't love and respect me, no matter how much I loved her. My love for her died, and even though I never expected it, I had to mourn its loss. I turned everything off, got into bed, and cried until morning. When I woke up, I saw my swollen eyes and messy appearance in the mirror and knew it was going to be a tough day. Despite the pain, I understood what I had to do. Update, I had been considering how to end our marriage and frankly how to hurt her like she hurt me. I know seeking revenge is immature, but I felt I needed to hurt her for my healing to start. I didn't harbor strong resentment toward Jeff, but it didn't seem right for him to be involved with another man's wife, break up their marriage, and not face consequences. I wanted my revenge, and maybe then I could move on. I went to Jeff's office to execute my plan. As computer boy, it was easy for me to make it happen without leaving any clues. I didn't even want to physically damage him anymore. I just wanted my revenge, and the cost would be high for both of them. During Jeff's staff meeting, I took his keys, had copies made, and accessed his house where he stored copies of his source code. Although I already had access to his computer system, I hacked into his security files, obtained passwords, and wrote a virus program to delete his source code from every drive on his network, including his home and customer computers. Activating the program would change all passwords and destroy all copies of his program permanently. Then I hacked into my wife's work computer, used her password to transfer $200,000 from my business account to Jeff's, and then to an account I set up for him in the Grand Cayman Islands. I erased the money trail, anticipating that a skilled analyst could eventually trace it. I don't know if Jeff and Karen got back together on Wednesday night, but it didn't matter to me anymore. On Thursday morning, I triggered the virus program. By Friday at 9 a.m., I handed Jeff a report on the software code theft and informed him that CSFI would bill him for my services. Knowing he wouldn't pay, I left his office with him expressing pleasure in knowing me. I thought, if he only knew, but I smiled, shook his hand, and wished him luck. I went to his home, used the copied keys to find archived copies of his program, took them with me, and headed to Milwaukee. In my apartment, I burned them all, seeking revenge without personal profit. I stayed there on Thursday night, waiting for the fallout. Friday morning, I informed Carrie that I completed the project and that Marco's software could be billed. She said she'd handle it and that my fee would be sent to my account. When I drove home, I found Karen crying. She told me she was sent home, pending an investigation into securities fraud involving money from our business account. I acted shocked and asked for details. She mentioned a money transfer to Jeff Marcos, someone she met a couple of weeks ago at the office but didn't know well. At 9 a.m., chaos erupted at Marco's software. Everything went dead as everyone was working. None of the programmers could access the system. Jeff struggled to log in, and the phones were ringing nonstop because their customers couldn't use the tracking program. I didn't witness it, but I knew it was happening. As I later learned, Jeff fired Tom, the programmer I had exposed earlier, for selling source code, believing he was responsible for the chaos. Well, Tom wasn't innocent, so he faced the consequences. As a programmer, I believe anyone messing with source code should be penalized. The $200,000 was traced to Jeff's account, and he denied knowledge, accusing Karen. She, in turn, denied knowing anything, blaming Jeff. During the investigation, I stayed calm until Jeff revealed they had a close relationship. I confronted Karen, and she admitted it, apologizing and crying for forgiveness. She claimed it was a one-time thing due to loneliness during my extended absences for work. I knew it was a lie, but I didn't bother challenging it. It didn't matter anymore. Jeff was found guilty of securities fraud, fined $50,000 and sentenced to 6 months in jail, serving only 3 for good behavior. However, upon release, he lost his program and company. Last I heard, he worked as a programmer for a competitor, and ironically, Tom worked there too. Karen lost her job, and unable to move past her infidelity, I served her with divorce papers, citing the infidelity clause. Being a computer geek paid off, her settlement was limited to only 10% of our net worth. She was fined $50,000 for securities fraud and received 3 years probation. Luckily, she avoided prison, but with only $150,000 left, she couldn't afford a decent house in Chicago. She moved to Milwaukee and became a waitress at a bar. While she might eventually rebuild her life, she won't enjoy the life we had together. I hope she always remembers how much I loved her and feels the hurt whenever she thinks of me. Update: I sold the Highland Park house and moved to an apartment in Milwaukee. I still had $1.8 million from our shared funds and an additional $1.2 million in the CSFI Inc. account. So I thought it was time to enjoy my wealth. I sold the company for another $4 million and decided it was time for Carrie to know her real boss. She mentioned that she knew it was me all along, regardless of any disguise I used. You've got to appreciate that woman, and I do, often, and well. She loves me in return. Neither of us works full-time now, we're just savoring the rewards of our hard work. We got married soon after my divorce was finalized, and we're expecting our first child this December.
Story 2.
My alpha husband discovered my 3 small mistakes and set a trap for me and my affair partner. I'm Don, and my wife is Carla. We've been married for 8.5 years and have 2 kids, an 8-year-old named Steve and a 4-year-old named Lori. Carla was pregnant when we tied the knot, and Steve was born 6 months after our wedding. Most of our friends and family didn't make a big deal about us getting married, except for Carla's parents. They were naturally disappointed in their daughter, but they made sure to point the finger at me. I was the one who got her pregnant, and I'm the guy who supposedly ruined all her opportunities. I never matched up to the man they envisioned for their daughter, and I never will. They believe she had to settle for me, and that really got to me. Admittedly, I did do what they accused me of. I convinced her and I was her first, that part is true. But as far as I'm concerned, her parents can keep their blame to themselves. I love their daughter more than they could ever hope for from any man, and she knows it. But her mother and father will never see it. They can't move past her getting pregnant. Nothing I've done or ever will do will change their minds. I'll always be the bad guy in their eyes until they pass away. Carla and I met when she was a high school senior in Chicago Heights, while I was in my 2nd year of college at the University of Illinois in Champaign. The moment I met her, I knew she was the one for me. We quickly became a couple and just felt like a perfect match. I took her purity about 1 month after we started going together, and we would make love almost every time we got together after that. After Carla finished high school, she moved back in with her parents and took a job as a teller at a Chase Manhattan bank. I saw her nearly every weekend, whether it was in Chicago Heights or Oak Lawn, where my folks lived. With 1 year left in college, I learned she was 2 months pregnant. We quickly organized a wedding and got married in November, and as I mentioned, Steve came along 6 months later in May. I completed my degree just 2 weeks after Steve's birth and landed a job in airport security at O'Hare Airport. Carla stayed with her parents until I graduated and secured my job. We had everything set up in our tiny apartment and moved in right after my graduation. Finally, we were together as a family, and for the next 8 years, life was blissful, better jobs, a new house, Steve growing up quickly, a satisfying marriage, the arrival of Lori, and both kids thriving. We were content. Promotions, more income, and increasing happiness followed. But let's move on to why I'm writing this story. All that happiness was about to change. I went through several unhappy months in my life. My wife and I were having a bit of a tiff about who was preventing the other from getting enough sleep. I told her she snored and woke me up, and she'd say the same about me. She refused to believe she snored at all, but she had this annoying, squeaky little snore that never failed to wake me. Once I was awake, I'd have to endure that squeaking for an hour before she'd stop, and I could fall back asleep. I know I probably snore too, as I catch myself doing it now and then. She might lose sleep as well, but it felt like she was solely blaming me, which didn't sit well. I already took enough of that from her parents, so I didn't feel I should have to take it from her too. To address the problem, I brought home a voice-activated recorder from work and set it up on the nightstand beside our bed. In a light-hearted tone, I told Carla that we'd discover who snores and who doesn't. The following morning, we both awoke simultaneously. After a sweet morning kiss, we rewound the tape and listened. Indeed, my snoring resembled a chainsaw, and she teasingly pointed out, "See what I have to endure?" It didn't take long before we distinctly heard her snoring too, sounding like squeak, 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 occurring in the pauses between my chainsaw-like snores. Carla gasped and shot me a surprised look that led to a hearty laugh. She exclaimed, "Oh my goodness, I'm terrible." We burst into laughter and she said, "Honey, we both need to work on this so we don't banish each other from the bedroom." I concurred, saying, "Yes, you definitely need to work on that squeak." I was just relieved not to be the sole bad guy. She playfully smacked my arm and apologized. "Honey, I'm sorry I placed all the blame on you. I can now see that we're equally at fault." I pulled her close for a warm and affectionate kiss and hug, followed by some intimate moments. By the time we finished, both kids were awake, and we ended up running late for work. As you can guess, what happened next is a classic case of the recorder being forgotten. A couple of days passed, and she requested that I come home early to look after the kids because she had a meeting at the bank. I spotted the recorder and couldn't resist the temptation of playing it. I wanted to hear the evidence of her snoring, but instead, I stumbled upon something entirely unexpected. The tape contained the sounds of us making love. What came next was a devastating revelation. She had been unfaithful in our marital bed. She had brought another man into our sacred space. Not much more needs to be said. As soon as I discovered the tape's contents, I reached out to our neighbor Judy and asked if she could watch the kids for a while because I had a major work project that required my full attention. Judy had no prior commitments, so she gladly agreed. I escorted the kids over to her place, instructed them to behave for Judy, and assured them I'd be back when dinner was ready. They were quite content to spend time with Judy and play with her kids, who were nearly the same age. After returning to the bedroom, I resumed playing the recording. "Oh my goodness, Steve, it's been too long. Since you've been close with me, I've really missed that over the past few months. Don't worry, my dear, I'll be intimate with you this afternoon. I genuinely wish you to become pregnant today. Don and I want another child. I would love for all 3 of my kids to share the same father. Hasn't Don ever felt suspicious about us? Doesn't he ever wonder why the kids don't resemble him at all? Is he stupid or something? Don't speak that way about Don. He's not stupid. I've never given him a reason to doubt my faithfulness." He chuckled. "Well, I still don't understand how you could slip the kids past him. Luckily, Stevie Jr. and Lori both resemble me, so there's no reason for him to be suspicious. Well, perhaps today I'll give you a child that resembles me and exposes your secret. Then he'll divorce you, and you can marry me." "Stop talking about all this, Steve. I care deeply for Don and don't want to see him hurt. What you and I share is merely passionate fun, and that's all it will ever be between us." The rest of the recording was as expected, filled with the sounds of passion between a man and a woman. I won't go into detail, it's too painful for me to even think about anymore. I listened to the entire recording. My entire marriage was a facade. The love, trust, and closeness I believed we had didn't exist. There was no love or faithfulness on her part. How could she truly love me and engage in those actions? She couldn't. When I heard everything on that tape, it felt like a crushing blow. I was deeply wounded, physically unwell. My heart raced, and I prayed it wouldn't give up on me. I was repulsed, emasculated, terrified, and furious. I can't continue. There are too many words to describe what I felt. Devastated sums it up best. I wasn't a foolish man, so I knew I needed to figure out my next steps. What would happen to me, my family, my life? First, I realized I had to secure a copy of the tape for evidence. I was certain it would be necessary in some way. The recorder had a dual tape system, so I set it up to duplicate from tape 1 to tape 2 and made my copy. I placed that copy in a plain envelope and stored it in the trunk of my car. Regardless of what unfolded in the following moments, I had that tape as proof. Secondly, I understood I had to keep my knowledge a secret, at least until I had a plan in place. I rewound the tape to the end of our snoring segment and erased the rest. Then I returned the recorder to the nightstand and left the bedroom. If Carla considered it, she might wonder if the tape had recorded her and Steve. However, she wouldn't hear anything, and I wouldn't tip her off that I knew her dark secret. I knew I needed all the facts to decide what to do. To start, I thought about when Carla and I first met and went from there. I got to know her through a friend of hers from school who was dating my cousin. I figured that her high school yearbooks would be a great source of information, so I went down to the basement, rummaged around until I found the box with all our high school yearbooks, and put both of our yearbooks into my car's trunk. I made sure to put the boxes back exactly as they were to avoid raising any suspicion. If she somehow noticed they were gone, I could always claim they got mixed up in another box. Lastly, I knew that if I saw Carla that night, she'd sense that something was seriously wrong. So I reached out to my boss Jim for help. Jim and I had become good friends over the years I worked with him, and I knew I could confide in him. I shared what I discovered and asked him to cover for me for a few days so I could get to the bottom of it all and make my final decision. I requested that he arrange a trip for me to New York under the pretense of attending an anti-terrorism school. It was consistent with courses I'd taken before and wouldn't raise any suspicions. Of course, I had no intention of actually going. I had places to visit, people to meet, and a web of lies to unravel. Jim agreed to help with the cover story, explaining that this class had come up last minute and was something I absolutely had to do. I needed to be on a plane within an hour. I called Carla on her cell phone and explained the urgent trip Jim had asked me to take. I mentioned that I dropped the kids off at Judy's for her to watch. Pack quickly and head to the airport. I told her I didn't have all the details for the class yet, but would update her when I found out. Naturally, she wasn't thrilled about my sudden departure, but I insisted there was nothing I could do about it and said goodbye. I heard her say, "I love you, Dawn," as I hung up, but I couldn't bring myself to say it back. I went over to Judy's place and told her I had to make a sudden out-of-town trip. I explained that Carla would come by in about an hour to pick up the kids, and Judy was fine with that. I asked if I could bring Steve and Lori home with me while I packed and said my goodbyes. She agreed, so we headed back to my place. Before leaving, I needed to collect DNA samples from the kids. I managed to get saliva samples from both Steve and Lori using Q-tip swabs. I planned to have their DNA analyzed and compared to my samples to prove I wasn't their biological father. The results would confirm what I already knew from Carla's confession on the tape. After packing enough clothes for a few days, I left the house with the kids and took them to Judy. I thanked her for watching them on such short notice and headed out. I drove to a hotel in Harvey, another suburb on Chicago's south side. It was far enough from Chicago Heights to avoid running into Carla's family, but close enough to use as a base for my investigation. After checking in, I picked up some beer and got drunk. It seemed like the only way to cope. Why lie awake in pain and hurt? Why relive it all in my mind all night? Getting drunk was my escape. The next morning, I felt terrible. It was past 11 a.m., and I thought I might not make it to noon. My head pounded, and my stomach churned. So I did the only logical thing. I had a couple more beers. Oddly, it turned out to be the right call because the next time I woke up, it was 3 p.m., and I felt a bit better. I ordered coffee and toast from room service. While waiting, I showered and dressed in clean clothes. The coffee hit the spot, and I managed to keep the toast down. Now, what was I going to do with the rest of the day? I checked my cell phone for messages and found 3 of them. The first was from Carla, and she was upset that I hadn't called her when I arrived in New York. She couldn't reach me because she didn't know where I was staying. She wanted me to call her as soon as I got her message. The second call was also from Carla, earlier in the morning, and she was really mad at me now. I hadn't called her last night or this morning, and she was clearly irritated. I didn't care, though. I planned to give her a big excuse when I finally talked to her. I knew I had to talk to her soon, but I would delay it a bit more. After all, she was already angry, so how much angrier could she get? I actually laughed at the absurdity of it. The third call was from Jim, and came just a few minutes after Carla had called. He told me she demanded to know my whereabouts and what was going on. He mentioned that I owed him big time for dealing with her, and I agreed. He explained to her that he had no more information than she did about where I was since he didn't know the hotel. He also told her about the seminar being held at a conference center at JFK Airport, suggesting she could try to reach me there. But we both knew the bureaucracy of airport security, and even if I was there, it would be nearly impossible for her to locate me. In reality, since I wasn't there, it was even more impossible. So I felt safe until I called her. I figured I had a couple of hours to work on my project before she got home from work. I sat down with my laptop and started working through my checklist. I listed everything I already knew and noted the details I needed to fill in. I went through her yearbook and made a list of every person who had written in her junior or senior yearbooks, cross-referencing them by class year. I also called her high school and inquired about a reunion book for her upcoming 5-year reunion. The administrative assistant was quite helpful and offered me a copy of the 10-year reunion book as well, which was coming up soon. I asked if it was available electronically and provided my email address for her to send it to me. 5 minutes later, I had the list and began matching the names from the yearbook with their married names, spouses, addresses, and phone numbers. Let me tell you, it was a goldmine of information. I had the most up-to-date list I could have hoped for. I even knew details like the names of children, pets, hobbies, favorite foods, and so on for all of Carla's classmates. I also discovered that Carla had submitted our current information, including our 2 kids, with a footnote that read, "Hopefully number 3 will be on the way soon." At this point, I was pretty sure Carla would be back from work, so I decided to make the dreaded phone call to her and endure her anger for a few minutes. It had been creeping into my writing lately, hadn't it? Well, that's because I no longer cared about her feelings. I blamed her for how I felt, so I wasn't going to worry if my sarcasm showed through a bit. She'd just have to deal with it. So I gave her a call. "Dawn, where the hell have you been? Why didn't you return my call last night or this morning? Or what the hell is going on anyway?" She was on a rant, but it didn't surprise me. I knew she would let it all out, so I let her. I explained that when I arrived, it was very late, and I didn't want to call and risk waking up the kids. I admitted I had felt sorry for myself and ended up getting quite drunk. By the time I woke up, it was too late to call this morning. I also mentioned that I had been rushing to set everything up for the next few days. I told her I stayed at the Hilton Garden Inn Hotel at JFK Airport last night, but could only get a room for 1 night. I had to find a new hotel for the next couple of nights. I advised her to keep calling my cell phone, as it was the best way to reach me. But I wouldn't have it on during my classes. My plan was to create the most significant window to miss her. I knew I needed to make anonymous phone calls while I was in town, so I decided to buy one of those disposable cell phones for the purposes I had in mind. I headed to the nearby pharmacy and picked up a track phone, which was quite reasonably priced and wouldn't be traceable. It was perfect. By the time I hung up the phone, it was nearly 6 p.m., and surprisingly, I was feeling quite good and getting hungry. I had spotted George's Rib House on my way back to the hotel and decided to stop and grab a bite to eat. Once I got back to the hotel, it was time to gather some facts. I started by going through Carla's senior yearbook, page by page, person by person. I compiled a list of everyone who had written comments in her yearbook and typed in the comments they had made. I set up a code system to categorize the types of comments. First, I used M or FM for each person. Friend was the code for those who seemed to be friends. If the person was a girl from what appeared to be Carla's close circle, I used girlfriend. For those who might have dated or had more intimate comments, I used boyfriend. Negative comments got labeled as non-friend. Once I finished, I had a list of about 40 names, including roughly 30 females and 10 males. I organized the list first by gender code and then by other codes. In the male category, I found 5 boyfriends, 4 friends, and 1 non-friend. Among the boyfriends was Steve Wilson, who I suspected was my prime suspect, but I needed to be sure before concluding anything. I was determined to find out. The non-friend, a guy named Gil Roberts, seemed like a promising source of information, hopefully due to some unpleasant history with Carla, or perhaps a dislike for Steve. In the female category, I had 3 girlfriends, around 25 friends, and 2 non-friends. All three of the girlfriends had been bridesmaids at our wedding, so I knew I had to be cautious around them. I figured a couple of the friends might have some useful information, and again, I planned to focus on the non-friends. People tend to spill more information when they didn't particularly like someone, and I was counting on that. I took my list and cross-referenced it with the reunion booklet, including married names, if available, addresses, phone numbers, spouses' names, children's names, hobbies, interests, and so on. I even added occupations and places of employment when I could find them. Not everyone provided the same information, but there was a wealth of data to work with. I figured the more details I had, the better my chances of getting the full story on Carla and her lover. By the time I finished compiling this information, it was a little past 10 p.m., and I'd had enough for one day. I planned to start early the next morning, hoping to wrap up my investigation by day's end, so I decided to call it a night and get some good rest. As I was turning down the bed covers, my cell phone rang. Glancing at the clock, I saw it was only 10:30 p.m., and I knew the kids were already asleep, and Carla had probably finished watching the evening news and was about to go to bed herself. I picked up the phone, wondering what she wanted to talk about. "Hi, Don. I thought maybe you'd call me tonight after getting settled," she said. "Well, I did consider it, but the last time I called you, I got quite an earful, so I thought I'd wait and see if you wanted to talk to me," I responded. "I'm sorry I got snippy with you earlier," she apologized. "I was just upset because I couldn't reach you. This whole trip of yours seems a bit strange, and I guess I was feeling a bit insecure. Will you forgive me?" "That doesn't exactly sound like forgiveness, honey," she shot back. "Well, maybe I'm a little ticked off myself considering how you've treated me," I replied. She fell silent for a while. I didn't know if she suspected I knew something or not, and to be honest, I didn't really care. I also wasn't sure if she was reflecting on the things that had damaged our marriage, but I kind of hoped she was. After a moment, she said, "Well, I guess I'll let you go then, Don. I'm sorry, I love you." I responded, "I'm sorry too." "Good night, Carla." I managed to get some sleep that night, although it was somewhat restless. At least I didn't have to listen to her snoring. However, it saddened me to think about it. She was so adorable when she first realized her snoring was awful. We had laughed so hard about it and then enjoyed a fantastic morning together. Recalling what happened afterward and what might never happen again broke my heart once more, and I drifted off to sleep. Update: the next morning, I got an early start with my lists. I used my track phone to call several female friends, introducing myself as Roger Moore from Homeland Security. I explained that I was conducting a background check on Don Phillips, who might be joining the Chicago Area Anti-Terrorism Task Force. I mentioned that Mr. Phillips was married to the former Carla Pon and asked if they knew her from high school. During these calls, I inquired about Carla's high school associations. Eventually, I confirmed that Steve Wilson had indeed been her high school boyfriend. They had dated for about 3 years, and she ended the relationship a couple of months after graduating from high school. I also learned that Steve was still living in Chicago Heights, working at Chase Manhattan Bank in Chicago Heights now as a loan officer, and he had recently gone through a divorce. It turned out he had 2 children, both boys. In the reunion booklet, I found his entry. He was a very good-looking man, and I could understand why he would catch a woman's eye. I wished I looked as handsome as him. However, despite their previous relationship, Carla chose me and gave me her virginity. But she continued to be involved with him, maintaining a relationship for years and apparently allowing him to father our children. The whys of her actions remained a mystery, questions I couldn't answer. Maybe she could provide some answers, but I wasn't sure. So, Carla ended her relationship with Steve shortly after we met, but they still worked together at the bank up until we moved to Des Plaines. That meant they were in close proximity all those days. I could understand how they rekindled their connection, but the reasons behind her choices were still unclear. I believed I had gathered enough information from the friends, so I decided to approach one of the female non-friends, Jill Johnson Marker. I maintained my cover as Roger Moore from Homeland Security and inquired about anything in Carla Peterson's background as Don Phillips's wife that might be of significance to his consideration for a national security position. Man, as soon as I said those words, she laid into me with both barrels. She made it clear that Carla was the most unpleasant person to ever graduate from Chicago Heights High School. According to her, Carla was a boyfriend stealer and a cheater. I asked her to explain why she felt that way. She shared that in her sophomore year she was dating Steve Wilson, and Carla had taken him away from her. While she acknowledged that boyfriend stealing isn't illegal, she believed it spoke to Carla's character. As time passed and Carla met her husband Don, the flaws in her character became more apparent, she confided. According to rumors, often started by Steve, Carla resumed her relationship with Steve after they both worked at the bank. Steve proudly claimed that he had fathered 2 of her children and even spread the news that she was pregnant again this week. This was the latest gossip. Jill expressed her doubts about entrusting national security to Don Phillips due to his unfaithful wife. I hadn't expected it to be so straightforward. I also didn't anticipate how much it would pain me to realize that others were aware of what had been happening all these years while I remained oblivious. I thought I might as well get the lowdown from the other two non-friends, so I called the other female, and her story closely paralleled Jill's. She was the sister of Steve's ex-wife. Her sister had divorced Steve after hearing the rumors and confronting him. Steve bragged about it, mentioning he had fathered 2 more children. I requested Jill provide me with her sister's phone number, and she willingly did. I planned to use it later. As for the male non-friend, he had been in love with Carla throughout high school, but she never gave him a chance. He mentioned that she claimed to be in love with Steve but probably wouldn't marry him because he was so self-absorbed. Supposedly, Steve had been trying to get close with Carla for 3 years. She always told him that she would only give her virginity to her future husband, but after losing her virginity, she might consider being with Steve for old time's sake. This attitude hurt the person sharing this information with me. He had hoped to be her future husband, and realized that she might not remain faithful to him. He believed she might allow Steve back into her life if he pursued it. He stopped trying to date Carla after that. Her apparent attitude stung me even more than I already was. It became clear to me that Carla hadn't planned on being faithful to me in any way. I had gathered nearly everything I needed from my list of names. Now I wanted a bit more insight into Steve, so I visited the bank to see him in person. I wasn't going to reveal my identity, but I wanted to observe him in the flesh. He matched the pictures, tall and athletic. It was a shame that he had a negative reputation, otherwise he might have been a good catch. I had a few more calls to make and stops to complete before returning home, but I was confident I'd be back in Des Plaines before nightfall. I checked in at the Candlewood Suites extended stay hotel near the airport and called Carla around 8:30 p.m. I informed her that I'd be home around noon the following day and suggested she take the afternoon off for some quality time together. I had grown quite resilient in my circumstances, and I didn't let on about what I had uncovered. I figured she had lied to me for years, so a few lies from my side wouldn't hurt much. I reassured her of my love, that everything would work out fine, and then I slept well. The next morning I stopped by my office to have a lengthy discussion with Jim. He was eager to learn what I had discovered, and I shared all the information I had gathered. He gave me an overnight envelope from the DNA lab where I had taken the DNA samples the previous day. It was an additional cost, but I was relieved that they offered overnight service. I opened the envelope because I wanted Jim to be aware of the results too. It was important to me that he knew all the facts. He was both my friend and boss, and I might need to request a significant favor from him in the future. Dear Mr. Phillips, we've completed testing on all 5 samples you provided on Wednesday, November 15th. Sample 1 is a male and is a full sibling to Sample 2, also a male. Sample 3 is a male and is a full sibling to Sample 4, who is a female. Samples 1 and 2 share the same father and have a different mother than Samples 3 and 4. In other words, all 4 samples share a common father, but Samples 1 and 2 have a different mother than Samples 3 and 4. As for Sample 5, which we know is you, Mr. Phillips, it is in no way related to any of the other samples. So there is no DNA evidence to indicate that you are the biological father of any of the 4 children represented as Samples 1, 2, 3, or 4. If you need further assistance, please don't hesitate to contact us. Sincerely, David Rafey, Ph.D., Accurate DNA Labs, Inc. I had reached out to Steve's ex-wife and arranged to talk to her. She agreed to meet with me and allowed me to take saliva swabs from her 2 children. I had a sworn statement in my briefcase from her confirming that she willingly provided the DNA samples for her 2 children. Jim gave me a warm hug before I left and expressed his sympathy for what I had discovered and what I was going through. He assured me of his support and willingness to assist in any way. He also made a light-hearted comment that he'd better watch out or I might take his job away, considering the thoroughness of my investigation in such a short time. We both shared a laugh, although it was a rare moment of joy in what had become a heavy situation. I gathered the tape, statements from many of Carla's former classmates, a letter from Steve's ex-wife, a certified letter from the DNA lab, and my aching heart. With these in hand, I went home to confront my wife. I arrived at our house a few minutes before noon. I fetched a beer from the fridge and settled in the family room, waiting for Carla to return. Shortly after 12 p.m., I heard her come in from the garage. She hurried over to me, hoping for a hug and kiss, but I evaded her. I could see a strange expression on her face when I did that, but I knew things were about to get much worse, so it didn't really matter all that much. She asked me what was going on, and I asked, "Do you want a beer?" She responded, "No, just tell me what's wrong." I said, "Carla, I know you've been having an affair." She started to speak to deny it, but I raised my hand to stop her. I told her, "I don't want to hear a word from you right now. I know you've been having an affair, and I have evidence. With that knowledge, there's no reason for me to believe anything you say, so don't continue to lie to me and claim you haven't been. Just sit on the sofa and let me explain how things are going to be. That's all I want you to do right now. Don't talk, don't cry, don't deny, and don't apologize. Right at this moment, none of that matters. Just sit and listen to me." Her face turned pale, and I could see fear in her eyes. I asked her again if she wanted a beer or at least some water, and she chose a glass of water. I got it for her and pulled up a chair across from her so I could sit and look her in the eye while I shared my thoughts. "Carla, I know you're having an affair. I want you to know that I have plenty of evidence to back it up. I want to make it clear that I'm not lying to you. To be fair to you, I want your actions moving forward to show that I'm fully aware of everything. It's in your best interest to believe this. If you doubt me, you're likely to make mistakes, and you won't like the consequences. Here's what's going to happen. Today, I'm leaving this house. I'll be packing up everything I might need for the next month, and I'll be moving out. Yes, for the next month, I won't be living here. We'll still be legally married, but I won't be residing here." When I mentioned this, she gasped and started to whimper, but she didn't openly cry or attempt to speak. I continued, "During that month, you have two important things to do. First, you must decide if you love me and if you want to continue being my wife. Regardless of my decision, you need to make this choice. If you don't love me or don't want to be my wife, nothing else matters, so you must make this decision. But I don't want to hear it today. Take the time to think about it, and after 1 month you can let me know. Secondly, you need to put in writing all the details of your betrayal of our marriage. I loved the Carla I knew, the one I married. I have to tell you that I don't love the Carla I now discover, because I don't even recognize who you've become. So every single aspect of your affair or affairs needs to be disclosed to me. I want to know who you had this affair or these affairs with. If it was just one person, I want their name. If there were multiple people, I want all of their names. I want to know why you had this affair or affairs. What did they offer you that I couldn't? I want to know when they started, how often they occurred, where they happened, what you did and what you said. I want to know what you gained from these affairs. I want every detail, Carla. Don't leave anything out. I want to get to know the real you, the woman you truly are. I've lost the image I had of you. But if I'm going to have any shot at saving our marriage, I need to understand who you've become. Remember this, Carla. I have concrete evidence. That said, do not omit any details and don't even think about trying to deceive your way through this. If you lie to me, I can guarantee it's over. If you tell me every truthful detail, there's a chance we could salvage our relationship. I said, a chance. No promises. Don't read more into it than that. I could see the panic intensifying in her eyes, and I was fairly certain she grasped the seriousness of the situation. If you find you can't or don't want to tell me the truth, just let me know by the end of the month, and we'll end our marriage as swiftly and painlessly as possible. Right now, the ball is in your court. You have all the decisions to make over the next month. When you've decided on your feelings toward me and whether you want to remain married to me, you can email a message to me at my work email and attach your written account of your betrayal. I expect both of those exactly 4 weeks from today, no sooner and no later. Also, if I ever discover that you resume your affair at any point in the future, our marriage will be immediately terminated. Ensure you understand that. Now, concerning the kids, do you want them with you for the next month, or would you prefer I take them? Either way is fine with me. If you want them, I'll visit them every Wednesday night. I'll pick them up from the babysitter and have them until 8:30 p.m., then bring them home. I'll call you upon arrival so you can come get them and know you're here. On weekends, I'll have them on one of the 2 days. You work out the schedule that suits you best, and I'll adhere to it. If you don't want the kids, I offer the same schedule to you as I've proposed. You can collect the kids from the babysitter on Wednesdays, and I'll pick them up here at 8:30 p.m. You can have them on one of the 2 weekend days each week, and I'll bring them to you on the chosen day. I'm going to start packing my things now, and once I'm finished, I'm leaving. Please decide about the kids before I go. With that, I exited the room and went upstairs to pack a few bags. While I was packing, I could hear her sobbing downstairs, but by the time I returned, she had regained some composure. Her eyes were red and her makeup was smeared, but she seemed more in control. Dawn, I know you don't want to hear this. You're right, I don't want to hear it. Follow my instructions, or we can end this fraudulent marriage right now. Do you want to keep the kids with you, or should I take them? I want them with me, she cried. Okay, then I'm leaving. I'll call you tomorrow to discuss the schedule for picking up the kids on Wednesdays and one day each weekend. Goodbye, Carla, and I left. The month passed relatively quickly. I took Steve and Lori out to dinner every Wednesday night and then back to my hotel suite. Lori, being so young, didn't know much about what was going on, but Steve had some inkling that something was amiss. He asked me why I wasn't at home, and I explained that his mother and I were dealing with some marital issues and trying to work them out, so it was best if I stayed away for a little while. I reassured him to be patient and not worry about us, emphasizing that both his mother and I loved him and Lori very much. Steve seemed satisfied with my answers, and I left it at that for the time being. I saw Carla each time I dropped off the kids at the house. She'd come to the front door to greet them and ensure they entered the house safely. Once, she started walking toward the car to talk to me, but I simply held up my hand to stop her and drove away. I could see her face in tears as I drove away, and she remained in the doorway. Exactly 1 month to the day after our confrontation, I received an email from Carla. Her message read as follows: Dear Dawn, I want you to know that I am deeply sorry for the pain you've endured. I love you, and I want to be your wife. Please call me after reading my letter and decide to come back to me. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I need you, and your children need you. Love, Carla. Upon reading that, I already suspected that Carla wouldn't be completely honest in her letter. I knew she wouldn't admit that Steve and Lori weren't my children. However, I had to read the letter to be certain. Attached to the email was a lengthy letter with the following content. Dear Dawn, I'm writing this letter to persuade you to return to me. I love you deeply, and I want to continue being your wife and grow old with you. It's a simple thing to say, but what I have to tell you is extremely complicated. I know it will hurt you, and I never wanted that to happen, but I'm committed to being completely honest with you. I love two men, you and Steve Wilson. You mentioned I was having an affair, and by most people's definition, I suppose I was. However, I didn't see it as an affair. An affair typically involves a brief infatuation leading to a short-lived illicit romantic relationship. I understand this is going to be painful, but my relationship with Steve dates back to before my relationship with you. You know I was involved with someone else when I met you. That someone else was Steve Wilson. We had been dating since my sophomore year. Steve is a handsome, charming, witty, intelligent, and caring man. He still possesses all those qualities. Shortly after I started dating him, I realized I was in love with him. He embodied most of what a girl could hope for in a boyfriend or husband. I loved him, Dawn, but he had one significant flaw that made marriage impossible with him. He was incredibly attractive and overly confident, making it clear he wouldn't stay faithful to me as a husband. Despite my love for him, I knew I could never marry him, and I was determined to preserve my virginity for my future husband. He persistently tried to persuade me otherwise, and although part of me was tempted, I held my ground. Then I met you. In a short time, I realized I loved you and wanted to marry you. The problem was that I didn't stop loving Steve. I loved you both differently, yet similarly. It's hard to explain, but that's the closest I can get to describing my feelings. Steve continued to pursue me despite knowing about you and my love for you. I once told him that maybe after I gave my virginity to my future husband, I might consider having closeness with him before marriage. He found it odd but didn't press the matter. After we made love, he could tell that something had changed. He kept asking for the opportunity I had offered, and we weren't married or even engaged, even though I knew you were the man I wanted to marry. Dawn, I gave in. I allowed Steve, and in truth, I wanted him to be intimate with me. I loved him alongside my love for you. I became pregnant, and I was certain it was Steve's child, not yours. But I wanted you to be my husband, not him. I can't believe I did all of this to you, but I did. From that moment forward, I know I betrayed your trust. I informed you about our impending baby, and you married me. You never questioned the child's paternity since you were the one who took my virginity. Little Steve looked like me, so there was no doubt about that. I didn't stop seeing Steve when you were away. We continued to meet every month or so. I remained involved with him even after our marriage. I loved you both. You were a fantastic father to Steve and continue to be for Lori. A woman couldn't wish for a better husband. My love for you kept growing each day. Although I understand this won't make you feel any better, my love for Steve remains unchanged from what it was back then. I scrutinized you closely for a couple of years, almost hoping you would be unfaithful so I could somehow justify my actions, but you never seemed to cheat on me as far as I could tell. You embodied everything a woman desires in a husband, and I was glad to have you, even if I didn't deserve you. I'm aware I'm dragging this out, but I'll continue and tell you the rest. You wanted me to explain many things, so I do. You provide all the details I can. Who is Steve Wilson? The answer is Steve Wilson. Why? Because I love him. Where? We met in various places. His home, here hotels and motels. We would meet at restaurants, parks, and in our cars. When? I don't remember all the dates and times, but it was once a month or every other month from then until now. We just made it happen when we could. We made love. We played and we played. We talked, we kissed, and we hugged. He did things with me that you and I had not done. I didn't really want to engage in those activities, but I permitted them with him because I had such limited time together. Don, he loves me as. Well, I saw it as a small consolation because I was your wife living with you while he only had me for brief periods. Steve eventually got married. It didn't last because, just as I expected, he cheated on his wife. He was involved with me and other women too, which his wife discovered, leading to their divorce. He urged me to divorce you and marry him, but I made it clear that I would never divorce you. I knew he would cheat on me. And it's amusing how the standard I demanded in a husband's character was much higher than the one I exhibited as a wife. I deeply regret that, Don. I know this is already too much, but there are 2 more things you need to know. Steve is also Lori's father. I'm pregnant, and I'm fairly certain it happened the last time Steve and I were together. This means that all 3 of our children have Steve as their biological parent. I thought it would be best if they were all true biological siblings, leaving no doubt. However, you are and always will be their father. You've loved and cared for them while Steve hasn't even met them. All these years he doesn't want to be their father, and I don't want him to be either because I want you to be their father. I'm deeply sorry that all of this occurred and that you've been so terribly hurt. If I could undo it all, I would. I'm praying that you'll come home to me, that you'll give me a chance to work this out and save our marriage. I'm praying that your love for me is strong enough to desire that. Please come back to me. I realize I haven't answered every question you must have, but I promise to address any inquiries you have. I'm begging you to give me a chance. I'll be waiting for your call. Love, Carla. The next day, which was Friday, I called Carla and informed her that I would be returning home early in the morning. I asked her to take the day off and drop the kids off at the babysitter's, because we had a lot of talking to do. She agreed to my request and inquired about what was on my mind. I responded, "You'll have to wait until tomorrow to find out," and ended the call. The following day, I entered the house. Carla was waiting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, which I gratefully accepted. I suggested we sit at the table so I could discuss some matters with her. After we got settled, I opened my briefcase and placed a substantial stack of paperwork and files on the table. Carla, this is my evidence. It begins with this audio tape. From it, I discovered several things. You were having an affair with a man named Steve. This affair had been ongoing since before we got married. Neither of my 2 children are biologically mine. You had planned on becoming pregnant again by him, so I'd be raising a 3rd child for both of you. You said you loved me and didn't want to leave me for him. The expression on her face was one of disbelief. If you're wondering where the tape came from, it's the audio recorder we used to record. Snoring. I erased everything except the snoring to keep you from realizing that you had been exposed. I didn't actually go to New York. I went to Chicago Heights to investigate your past, find out who Steve was, and learn about my children. That's why you couldn't locate me in New York. When I discovered the truth about you, I didn't want to see or talk to you again. I laid out the high school yearbooks on the table. I thought the best place to start would be your yearbooks. I compiled a list of everyone who had written comments in your yearbook and categorized them based on their apparent connection to you. Here are the details of what I found in your yearbook. I placed my cross-reference list on top of the yearbooks and also pulled out the reunion booklet. The school administration sent me this booklet for your upcoming class reunion. I used it to gather current names, addresses, and phone numbers for all the individuals on my contact list. I obtained valuable information from Jill Johnson Marker and Steve's wife's sister who was in your class. There was a guy from high school who had a crush on you for a long time, and he was quite helpful too. He told me he stopped loving you when he found out you intended to have a relationship with Steve behind my back after we got married. Many of your friends and acquaintances from our hometown know about your actions and what kind of person you are, Carla. I don't understand how you could have believed that Steve would keep quiet. After all, he was also involved in this. The next piece of evidence was a folder containing the letter from the DNA lab. This letter confirms that I am not the father of our 2 children. I got in touch with Steve's ex-wife, and she agreed to meet with me. She allowed me to obtain DNA samples from her 2 kids, hers and Steve's. And this letter certifies that Steve and Lori are half-siblings to Steve Wilson's 2 children. The letter from Mrs. Wilson affirms that these samples were collected with her consent, and that 2 of them are from her and Steve's 2 sons. I removed one last folder from my briefcase. Carla, this is all the evidence I have right now. I'm pretty sure I could find more if I tried, like hotel receipts, traces of bodily fluids on clothes, articles of clothing or possessions I'm not aware of. I suspect there's a lot of evidence, maybe even eyewitnesses, that I could uncover if I made the effort. I don't think I need to do any of that to prove the extent of your affair, do I? She shook her head no. I'm not someone who finds pleasure in listening to my wife being involved with another man. And I certainly don't need to hear the details from you, so I won't ask any more about that. Your letter confirms all the facts I've gathered, and I appreciate your honesty for once in your life. I thank you for having the courage to stop lying to me. Carla, I loved you with all my heart and gave everything I had to this marriage. I believed you did the same, and I was incredibly happy with you. But when I found out this foundation was built on deception, the only conclusion I could reach is that our marriage was based on lies, making our marriage itself a lie. When I first discovered all of this, I genuinely wanted to kick you, maybe even Steve. I don't have that desire anymore, but I will if it's absolutely necessary. All this while, I'd been watching Carla's expressions change. She went from being amazed at how I uncovered these truths to being terrified of what lay ahead for our marriage. Her reaction was even stronger when I confessed that I once felt like kicking her. I opened the last file on the table. Carla, these are divorce papers. I've already signed them, and all that's left is for you to sign them too. There are also documents granting me full custody of all the children, including your unborn baby. Her expression shifted from fear to sheer panic. At that moment, I thought I saw desperation in her eyes. Despite everything she'd done to our marriage, that look made me incredibly sad. It wasn't what I wanted, but I felt I had no other option. I couldn't continue living in the situation she had created. Once you've signed these papers, I'll keep them in my safe deposit box. Whether I actually file them with the courts in the future will depend on your actions. If you agree to all my terms, I won't leave you or force you out, but we won't be living as husband and wife anytime soon. I expect you to move your things into the spare bedroom right away, as I'll be using the master bedroom. I anticipate Steve will pay $2,000 per year for each child in child support. This money will be deposited into a trust account for each child until they turn 18, which includes the new baby. Steve's words made it clear he was involved. The total due now is $330,000, $116,000 for Steven, $88,000 for Lori as back payments, and $2,000 each for the upcoming year. Furthermore, he must acquire a fully paid life insurance policy worth $180,000 with the children as beneficiaries and you as the policy owner, allowing you to make any necessary changes. He will receive a letter stating that once he fulfills his commitment for voluntary child support, the policy ownership will be transferred back to him. Should he fail to meet either of these requirements, I will make this situation public and take legal action against him to recover both past and future child support. These court-ordered payments will be deducted from his wages by his current and future employers, potentially affecting his career advancement, which I'm not concerned about. If he accepts my terms but doesn't fulfill his future obligations, his life insurance benefits will provide for his children. Interpret that as you wish. All of this will be conveyed to him in a formal letter from my attorney, along with copies of all the evidence I've gathered so far. Update: you have two choices. You're free to leave anytime without the children. Just pack your bags and go. Alternatively, you can sign these papers and stay here with your children, even though we won't be living as a married couple. I don't see why you'd need an attorney since your options are quite limited. However, if you still want an attorney to look at these papers, you have until next Tuesday morning to get that done. But let me be clear, if you refuse to sign the divorce and custody papers and attempt to leave with the children, I will track you down and take legal action. Regardless of what happened to our marriage, I won't lose my children, and neither they nor I deserve that. I won't tolerate it, period. There's one more condition: you must never see or communicate with Steve again. If you do, and I find out, both of you will face severe consequences. You've already lost me, and you'll lose Steve too. As I insist on this, you won't be allowed to love either of us. Don't make a foolish move and lose your children as well. That's everything. So do you want to sign these papers right now, or would you rather consult an attorney? Yes, I will sign them now, she said. With that, she signed both the divorce papers and the custody papers. I placed them in my briefcase and informed her that I was going to the bank to secure them in my safe deposit box. I also told her to move into the spare bedroom, as we had discussed. Goodbye, Carla, I'll see you tomorrow, and then I left. I moved back in the next day and got settled. Carla had relocated her belongings to the spare room as instructed. Life moved forward. Our household seemed normal to an outsider. We maintained civility, engaged in conversations, shared meals, played with the children, and laughed at their antics. On the surface, We looked like an ordinary family. What was missing, though, was any trace of marital intimacy. There were no secret glances between husband and wife like we used to share. The intimate exchanges between us were gone, and our warmth had vanished. I avoided touching her, and I didn't allow her to touch me. Time moved forward like a relentless force, occasionally flattening us as it passed. Many nights, I lay awake, contemplating what we had lost, desperately wishing it would all fade away. I wished it was just a bad dream that would dissolve upon waking. Unfortunately, it lingered with us every single day. I'm aware that Carla endured countless tormented nights too. Every so often, her sobs would reach my ears. In the past, her tears would have torn me apart. There was a time when I would have done anything to restore her happiness. After hearing her cry, I would return to my bed and ponder how I had become cold and emotionally detached. I knew I had changed, turned into someone I was far from proud of, but I no longer cared. I had stopped feeling her pain and frankly had trouble even recognizing my own. Over the next few months, Carla made repeated attempts to engage me in conversations about her actions. She hoped we could talk it out and find a way to happiness once more. I responded bluntly, making it clear I wasn't interested in hearing more about her betrayal and that there was nothing she could say to make it right. Every time I rejected her, she retreated into herself, and her room would be filled with her cries. During this time, Carla's body was undergoing changes as her pregnancy advanced. One Friday morning, she called to inform me that she was in labor. I rushed home to take her to the hospital, and 3 hours later, she gave birth to a healthy baby girl. I stayed with her in the labor room and accompanied her to the delivery room. I even held her hand while she endured the labor pains and the process of childbirth. When Carla asked me what name I wanted for the baby, I suggested Grace, so we could call her Gracie. This choice surprised her because Grace was her mother's name, and she knew I had reservations about her mother due to her family's past treatment of me. I told her that she could select any name she liked, as long as it had no connection to me or my family. She looked shocked and hurt by this response. The new me didn't care. I just walked away. On Saturday, I visited Gracie and was charmed by her. She was absolutely precious, and it only took a few moments for her to win my heart. I fell in love with her, and it left me questioning how this could happen. How could I fall in love with another man's child? It had happened twice before with Stephen and Lori, although I didn't know they weren't my biological children. How could it occur again? I couldn't explain it, but it did. On Sunday, I went to the hospital to pick up Carla and Gracie to take them home. Carla's mother and father were in her hospital room when I arrived. Grace confronted me, asking why I hadn't visited Carla on Saturday when I came to see Gracie. I expected Carla to say something in my defense, but she remained silent. Carla had a tear in her eye and turned away from me when I held her gaze. I couldn't believe she allowed her mother to attack me once again. I felt deeply disgusted and furious. I told Grace that what I did or didn't do was none of her business, and if she wanted more information, she should ask her daughter. She pushed back, claiming that I had no right to speak to her that way because she was my wife's mother, and it was her concern. I turned to look at Carla again, and she raised her head, eventually saying, "Mom and Dad, just leave it alone. I think it's time for you to go so Don can take Gracie and me home." Her father couldn't resist sharing his opinion before he left. He said, "Listen, son, that's not the way to treat your wife's parents, but I should have expected it from someone like you." I retorted, "Don't you ever call me son again. I've never been your son, and I never will be. Now please leave." As we were in the car heading home, Carla expressed her apologies, saying, "Don, I'm so sorry about that." I replied, "Why, Carla? They've never liked me. They've never shown me an ounce of respect as their son-in-law. They've always thought their wonderful daughter married beneath her. Why should I be sorry? You've always allowed them to think that way about me. You've never defended me when they insulted me. Well, now I understand why. It's because you've never shown me any respect either. You started disrespecting me even before we were married, and it's continued every day since. No wonder they don't respect me." Time passed, and over the next couple of months, I kept myself quite occupied. I had a DNA test performed on Gracie, and the results confirmed that she was also Steve's child. I didn't really care about the test's outcome. I knew she would be. I only wanted the results for documentation. I loved that little darling as if she were my own. No father could love a child more than I loved her. When she looked up at me and smiled, it warmed my heart every time. That love had been firmly established within the first few minutes of my Saturday hospital visit, and it would never fade. I also spent more time with Stephen and Lori. I was the best father any child could wish for. I loved them more with each passing day and never once regretted that they were my children. Steve Wilson might have contributed half of their DNA, but I was their father in every other sense of the word. Life with my children couldn't have been any better. I loved and cherished them, and they loved and cherished me. The only thing missing was the love of my life, Carla. I often ruminated on that love and how much she had meant to me over the years. God, I missed my wife. I missed the woman who loved me. I cried often. Another action I took was using my connections to tap Steve Wilson's office and home phones. I'm aware it was illegal, but I didn't care. As expected, I discovered what I was looking for. Carla couldn't resist the urge to call Steve and inform him that he was a father again. "Hi, Steve, it's Carla." "What are you doing, Carla?" "You know you're not supposed to contact me. What if Don finds out?" "Oh, he won't find out, Steve. I'm using a payphone in the mall. There's no way he can discover that I called you." "Sweetheart, I just wanted to tell you that you're a father again, and she's adorable. Her name is Gracie. You make the most precious babies." "I'm happy that she's adorable, Carla. When do you want to start working on the next one?" He chuckled. "You know I can't do that right now, Steve. Don and I haven't had closeness since he found out, so there's no way I could get pregnant now." "Wow, you must really need it badly then, huh? When do you want to get together?" "I do need it badly, Steve, and I'd love to meet with you, but I can't take the chance right now. I'm still hoping that one day Don will forgive me, and I can have my marriage back. After that, we'll have to see if we can find a way to be together occasionally. I doubt it will ever be like it was before, though. Don is a lot more suspicious now than he was back then." "Okay, Carla, just know that I'll try to meet you wherever and whenever you can make it. Please stay in touch." "I will, Steve. Goodbye, sweetie. I love you." If you believe that phone conversation hurt me or made me furious, you're mistaken. After what she had done to me, there was nothing left of my heart that she could destroy. I was completely cold towards Carla. In my eyes, she was irrelevant. All the love I once had for her was now directed towards Stephen, Lori, and Gracie. They received all my love, and there was nothing left for Carla. Nothing she did or could ever do would change that. If I hadn't had my children to love, things might have been entirely different. I might have wasted away or turned to alcohol or work. I might have forgiven her and tried to rebuild our marriage. None of that happened because I had my children to love and they loved me. I didn't need anything or anyone else. Update: a few months later, Steve Wilson tragically left this world in a car accident. The accident occurred when his car veered off the road and collided with a tree. Carla learned of his death when she dialed his office number and a stranger answered. I had kept the phone tap active for this very reason. "Hello, this is Jonathan Davis." "Oh, I was trying to reach Steve Wilson." "I'm sorry, Steve Wilson doesn't work here anymore." "May I ask who is calling?" "I'm just an old friend. I'll try to call him at home." "Miss, I know this might be a shock for you, but Steve was in a car accident about 3 weeks ago. You should probably contact his family for more details. I'm so sorry to have to tell you that." I heard her gasp as the shock took her breath away, and then the line went dead. That night, when I came home from work, Carla gave me a strange look. I didn't act any differently than usual, and she didn't say a word. That night, I heard her sobbing again in her bedroom, and it continued for several nights. Shortly after, she received a letter from the insurance company with a claim form for Steve's insurance, naming the children as his beneficiaries. She showed it to me and asked how to fill it out. When it was mailed, she gave me another strange look. "You didn't seem shocked when you found out Steve had died," she said. I replied, "Carla, I have no feelings for Steve one way or another now. I'm not shocked, and I don't care. All I'm concerned about is ensuring his children have the money for their college funds." My reaction clearly unsettled her, and she continued to look at me strangely. A week later, a check arrived for $180,000, the payout from Steve's insurance policy. Carla and I deposited the funds into each of the children's college fund accounts. Each account had $46,000 plus some earned interest from Steve's initial deposit. When Stephen was ready for college, he'd have about $80,000 available. Lori would have around $100,000, and Gracie would have roughly $130,000. This would be a significant help in covering any education costs they might have. On the way back home, I mentioned that at the very least, the kids' college expenses were secured, and we wouldn't need to worry about funding each year. Upon arriving home, Carla requested to have a conversation. I agreed, and she inquired whether I would ever forgive her and love her again. I shook my head, signaling a no. She called me a cold-hearted person. I admitted she was entirely correct about that. She asked how I could become so emotionally distant. I explained that I had never been that way in the past, and was confident that her actions toward me had caused me to become this way. I assured her that I didn't feel the same emotional distance with my children, and she recognized that. She didn't see this side of me when I was with them either. I stated that it was evident that genuine love or respect for me had never existed, and she had only been utilizing me all these years and would continue, if given the chance. Then she surprised me by asking if I had played a role in Steve's death. I was certain she suspected it from the moment she learned. I nodded in agreement. She inquired why, and I explained that I had tapped into his work and home phones, eavesdropping on her conversations with him. I told her that I had overheard everything, including her discussions about him becoming a father again, and even her considerations of a potential reunion, albeit not immediately, but perhaps later, after things had settled down. I stated that it was evident that genuine love or respect for me had never existed, and she had only been utilizing me all these years and would continue if given the chance. She wondered if her end was near. I nodded in agreement, affirming that it was only a matter of time. 2 months later, she grew weary of waiting and took her own life. Tears welled in my eyes, not for Carla. She had become a stranger to me over a year ago when I first heard the recording exposing the falsehood of our marriage. However, my tears flowed because my children were in pain. Their innocent hearts, shattered by this tragedy, broke my own. Carla left me a letter, strategically placed for only me to discover. The letter began, "Dear Dawn, I am deeply apologetic. I cared for Steve, but not in the way I cherished you. My love for you surpassed anything else. I'm aware that my actions obliterated your love for me, and I cannot endure a life without it. I understand the immense pain I caused you, and I had hoped that with time, you might find it within yourself to forgive me and love me once more. I realize that my choices transformed you into a person you were never before. When I saw you confront Steve, I understood that your love for me had vanished, and I couldn't bear to accept that truth. I will carry the knowledge of having ruined a good man to my grave. I suppose you weren't the ideal husband for me after all. What I really wanted was a man who could accept my selfishness, my desire to love and be loved by 2 men. I don't blame you because it's an unreasonable thing to ask of anyone, but that's what I longed for. I lacked the strength to release myself from Steve's love. I should have, but I couldn't. I hope that my passing will free you from the inner turmoil you're experiencing. I hope that someday you'll find it in your heart to let go of the anger you harbor towards me and Steve. I pray that you'll eventually forgive yourself for the person you became and for your actions towards Steve. I also know that the bad feeling is never around when you're with your kids. I can see the love and admiration in your eyes, and it makes me happy to see them loving you back. When you look at the kids, I hope you can see a part of me in them and love them a little more for it. I hope that one day you'll love me again through your love for them. I'm really sorry, Dawn. Please forgive me for this last action. I just can't handle it anymore. I love you, Carla." This time I cried genuinely. The bad feeling went away as she had hoped for. I cried for the friend I lost, who would never share laughter or tears with me again. I cried for the lover who would never embrace me or love me again. I cried for the mother of my children, who wouldn't be a part of their lives, their joys, their weddings, their grandchildren, their achievements, or their setbacks ever again. I cried for the emptiness in my heart that was left when the hatred disappeared. I had filled that space with hatred to erase the love I felt for her, and now it was vacant. I cried for the life I had imagined with Carla, knowing it could never be replaced. And then I cried for my soul, realizing I had allowed myself to become less than human because of my hatred. I got rid of the letter. I went to the bank and got rid of all the proof that she cheated, except the DNA evidence that was kept in the safe deposit box. No one would ever find out about it unless there was a future health reason for my kids to know I'm not their biological father. In my will, I arranged for money to be put into a medical trust and appointed a medical trustee to manage it. The DNA results would be given to the trustee in a sealed envelope, only to be opened if there were any hereditary health issues. I'd do whatever it takes to keep Carla's memory positive and healthy for her kids and her family. No one else needed to know what she did. I never stopped Carla's parents from seeing their grandkids. They loved them and treated them well. I knew they held me responsible for their daughter's death. I could see it in their eyes, but they were smart enough not to bring it up. I guess they thought it was best to treat me well, or I might not let them see their grandkids. I wouldn't have done that, but I was grateful they didn't bother me. Over time, the emptiness in my heart began to fill with love for the kids and fond memories of Carla. Despite everything that happened, she had made me happy for 8 years, and I didn't want to erase that anymore. Eventually, I even forgave myself. It took a while, but it happened. I had 3 amazing kids, and they needed their father. I sat in the front row and watched Steven graduate from high school. He got his diploma from the school board president, who gave him a warm hug. Next up was her daughter, Jennifer. She got her diploma and a hug, too. Jennifer was Steven's girlfriend, and they'd been together since his first day of high school 4 years ago. I couldn't be prouder of him, and I couldn't help but think that Carla would be proud too. I know I had tears in my eyes as they walked off the stage together, looking so grown up. Stephen and Jennifer were both heading to the University of Illinois in the fall, and they were deeply in love. It was clear to everyone that they'd eventually get married. I was sure Carla would have liked Jennifer too. After the ceremony ended, they came down to the audience and gave me a big hug. I couldn't have been prouder of them. They both did really well in school and were great at sports. Their future looked really bright. Stephen asked if it was okay for him and Jennifer to go to a few graduation parties before coming home, and I said yes. Jennifer gave me another hug and said, "Thanks, Daddy. We'll see you and Mom later." As they walked away, I thought about what she called me, Daddy. I had become her father, too. I met Leslie, her mother, a few weeks after Stephen started high school. She was the school board president and involved in school activities. Stephen kept talking about Jennifer and how great her mom was, and we eventually met at a football game. I felt like a teenager again because I was immediately smitten with Leslie. I probably acted like a fool. I learned that she was a single mom. She had divorced when Jennifer was 9, and her ex-husband wanted nothing to do with their family. After chatting for a while, I asked if she wanted to get coffee after the game, and she said yes. We spent a lot of time together, and a year later we got married. I love her deeply, and she loves me back. For a long time, I didn't think I could ever be happily married again, but I am. For the past 3 years, we've been a complete family. She loves Stephen, Lori, and Gracie as if they were her own, and I love Jennifer like she's my own daughter. I've learned that you don't need to be a biological parent to love a child. Leslie is aware of everything that happened with Steve and Carla. She knows all the actions I took during that time. I didn't want to keep any secrets from her if I was going to love her and spend my life with her. When I explained everything to her, I saw her expression change briefly. She mentioned that my revelation surprised her, but she believed I was telling the truth about the bad times being over. So, she wasn't worried about our future. Our life together is amazing. I have a new friend, a new romantic partner, and a lifelong companion for all my dreams. My heart is filled with love for my new wife and our children. And yes, there's a small space in there for the good memories I shared with Carla. Stephen has grown into a handsome young man, and while he resembles Carla somewhat as he ages, he starts to resemble his father more. On the other hand, Lori and Gracie are like mini versions of their mother. They are beautiful and charming, and I see so much of Carla in them that I can't help but love her for giving me these wonderful children. As they grew older, I shared with them as much as I could about their mother. I want them to know her as I once did, love her as I did back then, and understand that she loved them deeply. Just then, Leslie approached me, and my thoughts about the past were interrupted. She asked where Stephen and Jennifer were going. I told her they wanted to attend a couple of graduation parties before returning home. She smiled at me and suggested that if I hurried, we could head home and start working on the baby we had talked about. We quickly got to the car and headed home. Life is good and getting better all the time.
Story 3.
One evening, I sat at our table reviewing my daughter Katie's medical forms. Katie was gearing up for kindergarten, so the pediatrician conducted a thorough checkup. Meanwhile, my wife left her school forms spread out on the table. Glancing lazily, I noticed the letter that shattered my marriage. In the blood type column, it read A. I was frozen for about 10 seconds. I had no clue. Retrieving 2 sheets of paper from our medical records, I confirmed everything matched my recollection. Last summer, both my wife and I donated blood to the Red Cross, receiving receipts indicating our blood types. Here on 2 sheets of paper, mine was B and hers was O. So there was no way Katie could be my daughter. If my wife was her mother and I witnessed Marie give birth to her, then someone with blood type A had to be the father. The kids were already asleep, and Marie was upstairs watching TV. I grabbed a beer from the refrigerator and sat in the backyard pondering, how did my marriage fare? I'd say, okay, pretty typical. Both good and bad. Depends on what day you ask. During our courtship and early marriage, Marie and I were passionately in love. We were lovemaking constantly, sometimes wildly, even beyond the bedroom. We were always touching, holding hands, walking hand in hand, stroking each other's neck or back as we passed by. Of course, over time, it faded away. Doesn't that happen in every marriage? But now, with proof of her infidelity smacking me right between the eyes, everything I had ever thought about our marriage was on shaky ground. I sat and pondered. What changed? Gradually or suddenly? It seemed like both. The decline in our bed life was gradual for a while. But about 6 years ago, a few months before Katie was conceived, There were some odd months. Marie, my open and loving wife, was acting very strange. One evening she returned from work quite late, briefly allowed me to kiss her tenderly, immediately went to the shower, and avoided me for the rest of the evening. The next morning was just as cold and unceremonious. But that night she became completely different. She came home early, cooked a special dinner, tucked me into bed early, and made love to me with an eagerness and passion that I thought we had lost. We hugged happily before going to bed. And Marie told me how much she loved me. Several more times this week we had passionate lovemaking. Then the cold night soon happened again. She returned late from work, didn't say a word to me, and quickly took a shower. For the next 2 months, I hardly knew who I married. Marie was passionate and loving. Marie was cold. Marie was attentive. Marie was distant and preoccupied. Marie was patient. Marie was irritable and hot-tempered. I asked her several times if anything had happened, Ed, if something between us was bothering her, if there were problems at work. But the only response I received was, "I don't know, Bill. I'm probably just a little nervous. Sorry." When things finally got back to normal after 3 months or so, it was much less pleasant than at the beginning of our marriage. Marie's demeanor shifted, becoming less volatile, yet she seldom displayed affection, and interest in lovemaking waned. Closeness occurred scarcely, maybe once a week, sometimes stretching to a fortnight, only upon my insistent request. Any subtle hint, like suggesting we spend the evening together, met with firm rejection. I had to explicitly mention the long hiatus since our last encounter. Marie would comply reluctantly, but it was evident she considered it a favor. Do all marriages follow such a melancholic course? It was the only marriage I knew, so I couldn't say. Naturally, I pondered the cause, entertaining the notion of infidelity. However, Marie soon became pregnant, and our anticipation of the future baby, coupled with the joy of having Katie, eclipsed most of my concerns about our relationship. After Katie's birth, fatigue consumed us, making Marie's disinterest in lovemaking more understandable, though I remained dissatisfied. When Katie turned 3, Marie conceived again, and we welcomed Brian just after Katie's 4th birthday. Bill and Marie, once passionate partners, transformed into parents of 2 delightful yet exhausting children. We cherished our kids. Despite realizing my discontent with our marriage and our minimal bed life, I didn't acknowledge it then. Perhaps I believed it was typical for couples with young children. Armed with the shocking revelation that my daughter wasn't biologically mine, the events from 6 years ago didn't seem as enigmatic. Marie likely initiated an affair around that time. It clarified her distant behavior and sudden showers. The subsequent passionate closeness and warmth could be attributed to guilt or, if I were charitable, an effort to maintain marital harmony while continuing the affair. As I sat in the yard under the darkening sky, my initial shock transformed into seething anger. My beloved wife not only betrayed me, but also bestowed another man's child upon me. Perhaps even Brian wasn't mine. If my sole intent then was to punish Marie, I would have stormed inside, presented the evidence of blood types, coerced her confession, and expelled her deceitful self onto the street. But it wasn't that simple. I cherished my children, regardless of their biological origins. If we divorced, Mary would likely gain custody once the truth emerged. I contemplated. I asked myself, what do I desire? The answers were surprisingly lucid. Firstly, I yearned to uncover Marie's actions in detail. Was it a brief affair? Did she know Katie wasn't mine? Or was she aware of everything, engaging in a clandestine affair for years? Secondly, I resolved to raise my children as my own, shielding them from the truth of their parentage. Once I established my objectives, mapping out how to achieve them surprisingly felt straightforward. Upon returning home, I noticed cotton swabs leading to each of the children's rooms. I carefully obtained swabs from inside their cheeks without disturbing their sleep, wrapping each one separately. I designated Katie as number 2 and Brian as number 3. Then I headed to the kitchen where I affixed a tampon to my cheek and marked it as number 1. Having a friend employed in a university chemistry lab, I arranged for DNA testing, marking the initial phase of information collection. Upon receiving the first results, my subsequent actions became clear. A week later, my friend contacted me, unaware of whose samples they were. I informed him of acquaintances sharing the same last name, speculating on distant relations. "Hi, Bill," he began. "Your numbers 2 and 3 are undoubtedly siblings, while number 1 is unrelated to them. It seems these individuals aren't your cousins, after all." I expressed gratitude before hanging up. So Katie and Brian were indeed siblings, sharing the same parents. Marie had 2 children with this mysterious man. But did she know? Surely she knew she was involved with him, but was she aware he fathered our children? There was a simple way to find out. I approached Marie in the kitchen, initiating the conversation without turning around. She encouraged me to continue. A colleague of mine has a biologist friend conducting DNA research, requiring samples from related individuals. I volunteered to provide samples from you, me, and each of the children. I'll handle the kids before bedtime, and then we'll do ours. Sound good? I observed Marie closely as I explained. Halfway through, she tensed, nearly dropping a pan. She regained composure and continued washing. After I finished, there was a moment of silence before she turned to face me. I'm not entirely comfortable with this idea, Bill. How do we know what the biologist will do with the samples? Can we trust our information will remain confidential? I began to counter her concerns, but she abruptly objected. No, I'm not keen on this idea. Please inform your colleague we won't participate. All right, honey, I replied softly. Regardless, it was fine. Her reaction told me all I needed to know. My next move was to unearth details about her affair or affairs. Who, where, and when, perhaps even why. It was plausible that Marie had concealed something within our house. That could provide a clue. But I require sufficient time to conduct a thorough search. That Saturday, we had plans to visit her parents' house for the afternoon. A few minutes before our departure time, I entered the bedroom, dialed our home number on my cell phone, then pretended to engage in a conversation with my boss at work. Upon completing the call, I approached Marie. Honey, I apologize, but there's a crisis at work, and they urgently need me for at least 4 hours today. Otherwise, the company will face serious issues. Damn it, Bill. My parents are eager to see their grandchildren. I understand, I reassured her. I'm truly sorry. You go ahead. Just convey my apologies. You and the kids will have a good time. I'll prepare myself some dinner, and I'll see you in the evening. She accepted the change in plans without further objection, and soon found herself in the car with the children. Now I had ample time to systematically search the house. I concluded that searching in the usual spots where I frequent would be futile since Marie was unlikely to hide anything there. Therefore, I bypassed the kitchen, bookshelves, living room, and so forth. I also disregarded my bedroom and bathroom areas, but thoroughly inspected all sections of her closet and dresser drawers. The discovery that caught me off guard was a pair of very alluring lingerie pieces that I had never seen her wear. They were discreetly tucked away in the back corner beneath everyday items, suggesting her desire to keep them concealed from me. Only the children's rooms and the attic remained unsearched. Reasoning that the children's rooms were less probable, I ascended into the attic. There, I found various forgotten pieces of furniture, a couple of lamps, and several boxes of items predating our wedding. With so much to inspect, I decided to focus on the 3 boxes situated to the side. One of them appeared less dusty than the others, indicating recent handling. Upon closer examination, I observed that these boxes had been moved more recently compared to the rest of the attic clutter, which seemed untouched for years. Consequently, I directed my attention to these 3 boxes and uncovered everything I sought. They contained Marie's old possessions, predominantly letters from college friends and acquaintances. Among these items, I discovered a collection of letters and mementos from myself, including affectionate greeting cards. Deep within one of the boxes, strategically hidden beneath aged papers, lay a slim stack of more recent notes and 2 unlabeled videotapes. Retrieving them, I brought them downstairs for further scrutiny. A mere 20 minutes spent reviewing the notes provided me with nearly all the information I needed. It became apparent that Marie had been unfaithful to me with Harry, her office boss. The affair seemingly commenced about 3 months prior to Katie's conception, coinciding with the period when Marie exhibited unusual and erratic behavior at home. All the letters were from Harry to Marie, and they were harsh and forceful. There was no affection in them, just a lot of desire. Right from the start, their relationship seemed almost like a dominant, submissive dynamic, with Harry dictating terms. Some letters instructed her on how to dress for specific occasions. In others, he detailed exactly how they would engage in closeness the next time they stayed late at work. A few notes congratulated her on the birth of their children and derisively referred to me as a naive fool who, unknowingly, was raising his offspring. It was evident he had no intention of acknowledging his children. I knew he was happily married to a woman named Caroline, and they had 3 children of their own. Apparently, Caroline was oblivious to his affair just as I was. My jaw clenched as I read. It was clear Harry held sway over Marie, but she willingly acquiesced. There was no suggestion of coercion or blackmail. She seemed to relish playing this role for him and being directed. Moreover, it was apparent they both knew the true paternity of Marie's children, and they seemed to revel in the clandestine knowledge they held over me. From these letters, I couldn't glean much about Marie. However, there was now no doubt she had been deceiving me for over 6 years and intentionally conceiving children with another man while masquerading as my loving spouse. I had been seething with anger for days, but these letters fueled it further. My plans for retribution would also encompass Harry. After a moment's pause, I took the tapes to the VCR and began to watch. Both depicted Harry and Marie engaged in lovemaking acts. The earlier one, judging by Marie's hairstyle, seemed to be filmed in an unfamiliar room, possibly Harry's residence. The more recent one was filmed in my own bedroom. I wondered when Marie had the opportunity for this. It occurred to me that I had taken several business trips over the past year, and perhaps she had left the children with her parents during those times. Overall, the recordings confirmed Harry's carnal dominance over Marie and her enthusiastic compliance. The lighting wasn't bright, but they were both clearly visible, and the sound quality was remarkably clear. I could hear every word, every moan on the first tape. Right from the start of their affair, I heard Harry issuing commands. He sat on the bed and instructed Marie to perform a seductive striptease, which she did with a smile. The closeness was rough, lacking gentleness or affection, and his language was coarse. It saddened me to see that Marie clearly enjoyed what she was receiving. The second tape featured similar lovemaking scenes, but with some new intriguing dialogue. They were lying on the bed. Marie asked Harry why he didn't mind me raising his children, and he responded, "Bill is decent enough, and as you say, he's fond of children. I have 3 of my own, and I don't really care beyond that. If it weren't for that," he continued, "I would have told you to leave him long ago. What does he offer besides changing diapers?" "That's not fair, Harry," Marie replied. "Bill is a good and kind person. He genuinely loved me and provided for me and the children. And that's why you let me have my fun with you all these years, right?" She smiled at him and playfully hit his arm. "You've never been as gentle and caring as Bill, and that's probably why I'm so drawn to you." "Yes, baby. I give you what you want," he replied. "Now let's get on with it before I have to leave." After finishing both films, I sat down and pondered how arrogant they both were, not only to write these letters, but also to be careless enough to leave them and Harry's notes where I could discover them. My retaliation will be complete, directed at both of them. I utilized a scanner to digitize each note onto my hard drive. Then, employing sophisticated software borrowed from work for a project I had undertaken last summer, I transformed each videotape into a digital file on my hard drive for future editing. After finishing, I stowed the records and tapes in the trunk of my car, concealing them beneath the spare tire. Lastly, I tidied up the attic, meticulously restoring everything to its original place to ensure Marie remained unaware of my presence. Over the ensuing 2 weeks, I methodically devised and executed my schemes. Surprisingly, it was far easier than anticipated for me to be utterly deceptive towards Marie, behaving as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. I realized she had been deceiving me for 6 years, so why should I struggle to reciprocate? Thus, I remained kind and affectionate, attending to the children's needs, showing Marie the same tenderness as before, and even initiating closeness on a couple of occasions. However, I did so cautiously, making it easier for her to decline. Truthfully, I had no desire to touch her again. A significant event loomed in Marie's life. She had been elected as the new president of the Key Society, a prominent charity in our city, and was set to assume office at a luncheon where she would deliver a speech outlining the charity's plans for the upcoming year. Having served on the Key Society board for 3 years, Marie was deeply honored by her appointment as president. Nervous about her presentation, she sought my assistance in crafting the PowerPoint she intended to use. This presented a golden opportunity for me. For about a week, I collaborated with her every evening, allowing her to showcase her slides and other materials while helping her organize them into a cohesive presentation. She rehearsed this routine several times in the month leading up to her big day, and each rehearsal went smoothly. Simultaneously, I prepared my own entirely distinct PowerPoint presentation, poised to replace hers. The night before the luncheon, I deleted Marie's file and substituted it with mine. Additionally, I added a password so that once the file began running, she wouldn't be able to disable it. All that remained was to ensure that Marie had invited Harry and his wife to the luncheon. I casually inquired, and she confirmed they would be attending on the appointed evening. I felt as excited as Marie, albeit for different reasons. Arriving early, Marie, resplendent in a sleek black evening gown, looked breathtaking. I assisted her in setting up the laptop and conducted a couple of tests to ensure smooth playback. We all savored a delightful dinner and listened to some introductory speeches. Marie was warmly introduced by the outgoing president, and she approached the podium appearing shy yet proud. As applause filled the room, she began speaking and initiated the PowerPoint presentation. Initially, it proceeded as expected, showcasing photos of the society's charitable endeavors and financial data. Then, according to my plan, it took an unexpected turn. Suddenly, a series of still images appeared, frames I had extracted from 2 videos depicting a couple engaged in various carnal positions. Though some photos were dimly lit, the overall impression of 10 or 12 of them confirmed they featured Marie and Harry. For a few minutes, Marie continued discussing key social issues. However, she noticed the sudden murmur from the audience, prompting her to glance at the screen behind her. Gasping, she accidentally knocked over a glass of water onto the podium. Momentarily frozen in shock, she then flushed crimson with embarrassment, frantically attempting to halt the presentation by pressing buttons on her laptop. By then, the still photos had transitioned into brief video clips. "How will you prevent Bill from discovering I'm carrying your child? As long as I let him have his way occasionally, he won't suspect anything," Harry's voice declared. "But not too often, baby, you're mine." The room erupted in noise. Laughter and cheers reverberated from every table. Marie stood in disbelief, too stunned to even feel embarrassed. Nearby, Caroline, Harry's wife, seized a vase of flowers, smashed it over Harry's head, and stormed out amid the commotion. Gradually, the guests dispersed from the ballroom, exchanging gestures and reliving the astonishing scene. Surprisingly soon, Marie and I were alone. She stood defeated and bewildered on the podium, while I sat at a table 10 feet away, wearing a broad smile and gazing up at her. Finally, she met my eyes with a look of profound sadness. "Bill, how could you betray me like this? I thought you loved me." Given the circumstances, her question struck me as absurd. I couldn't help but burst into laughter before exiting the room. Still, no, not at all. It was merely a fanciful notion. The entire town would soon learn Harry was the father of my children, potentially leading to their loss in the divorce. Moreover, they would likely resent being labeled as Marie's illegitimate offspring. No, I should have been more discreet, and I acted first. I consulted a divorce lawyer, having met him previously, and prepared documents for future use. Then, I crafted the precise PowerPoint presentation I had described. However, I didn't wait until Marie's scheduled dinner to unveil it. Instead, I arranged for Marie to view it herself. One evening, 4 weeks before the dinner event, after the children had gone to bed, I called Marie. "Honey, I'd like you to take a look at the draft of the PowerPoint I prepared for your speech next month." "Can it wait, Bill?" she snapped, visibly exhausted. "I'm absolutely spent today." "No, dear," I asserted firmly. "I need to review what changes are necessary so I can address them promptly. Please remember that I dedicate my free time to these tasks for your benefit." With that, I escorted her into the office and seated her in front of the computer. "Simply press A when you're ready, and the file will commence on its own," I instructed, inwardly smiling. I monitored her closely. Initially, everything proceeded smoothly as she rehearsed her remarks on the initial slides about the society. Then, her demeanor shifted abruptly. She gasped, her face draining of color as she beheld still images of herself and Harry engaged in love-making acts. She turned to me, mouth agape but uttered no sound. I maintained a neutral expression. Next, video clips surfaced, featuring conversations about his paternity of her children and his deliberate deception of me, interspersed with more love-making scenes. Despite Marie's frantic attempts to halt the file, I prevented it, and the screen went dark. This sequence lasted about 2 minutes. Marie slumped in the chair, head bowed. She couldn't muster the courage to meet my gaze. Quietly relishing her distress, I waited. Eventually she spoke, lifting her head to look at me. In that moment, she appeared to age 20 years. "Bill, me? I don't... Oh, Bill, I'm so sorry," she cried. "I truly am. Can you ever forgive me?" "Forgive you?" I responded coldly. "For what? Let's see, for carrying on an affair with Harry Dorner for the past 6 years of our marriage, for bearing his children and deceiving me into believing they were mine, for mocking and disparaging me behind my back, for refusing closeness at Harry's behest. Is that what you want forgiveness for?" Her sobs intensified. "Bill, I don't love him. It's you I love, always have," she sobbed. My anger remained icy, contained. I said nothing, but inwardly thought, "No, Marie, that's nonsense. You love our comfortable life together. You enjoy my devotion, my care for the children, but you don't love me. No woman who loves her husband would betray him as you have." I reclined and allowed her tears to flow. I took satisfaction in her anguish, maintaining silence throughout the 20 minutes it took her to cry. Eventually, she sobbed several times, wiped her tear-streaked face, and looked at me. "What will you do, Bill? Are you going to divorce me?" "No, Marie, I won't do that," I lied. "I care too much about Katie and Brian, even if they aren't biologically mine." I let the statement hang in the air briefly before continuing. "But things will be drastically different from now on. You can count on that. Let's begin immediately. Summon that idiot Harry and tell him to be here in 15 minutes. Horror flickered across her face. "But I can't do that. He's at home with his wife and children." "He won't come," she protested. I smiled. "Say whatever you must, but summon him here. Inform him that if he fails to arrive within 15 minutes, his marriage will be dissolved by tomorrow." She glanced at me, perhaps apprehensive of the coldness in my expression. Then, without uttering another word, she headed to the kitchen and contacted her paramour. When Harry arrived, he offered the soft, insincere smile I anticipated. Marie must have briefed him on the situation, as he appeared anxious and uneasy. "Come into the office and have a seat, Harry. And you too, Marie. We need to discuss something," I directed. Once we were all seated, I wasted no time. "All right, Harry. Here's the deal. You've been enjoying yourself with Marie for quite some time, making a fool out of me. That ends now. Everything has changed, and it's time for you to face the consequences." Before he could respond, I interjected. "Sit, watch, and listen." I navigated through the PowerPoint presentation, relishing Harry's horrified reaction to its contents. When the presentation concluded, an unsettling silence ensued. I think I relished it more than they did. "Now you will do as I say, precisely as I say, or your blissful marriage to Caroline will come to a sudden and public end. Understood? Don't speak. Just nod your head." He begrudgingly complied, wearing a scowl. "Good. Now listen up and keep your mouth shut. I have several documents for you to sign. I'll give them to you one by one. You might want your lawyer to review them, so I'm giving you 48 hours to return them to me, signed, or Caroline will be treated to a brief viewing of a certain video. The first document acknowledges that you are the biological father of Katie and Brian, and commits you to paying child support for them until they turn 21, plus a lump sum for college. The amounts are specified here: $10,000 per child per year, along with $100,000 per child in their first year of college. The funds will be placed in a trust fund for which I am the sole trustee, authorized to utilize it as needed for the children's welfare." Harry leapt from his seat in fury. "Listen, Bill, this is utter nonsense. I have no intention—" I forcefully pushed him back into the chair. "Shut your mouth, Harry. We both know you're wealthy. This isn't your show anymore, it's mine. You have no say. Now keep quiet until I permit you to speak." I noticed Marie looking at me across the room, a mix of horror and disbelief on her face. This was a facet of her loving husband she had never witnessed before. "The second document grants me permission to adopt the children. Both you and Marie must sign it. I'll ask her to do so once you've returned it to me. The third is a declaration renouncing your parental rights to Katie and Brian and vowing never to disclose your paternity. Lastly, this is a personal admission of workplace carnal intimidation against my wife by you." "What?" Harry sprang up again. "That's a complete lie. She wanted it as much as I did." "Sit down, Harry," I commanded solemnly. "Perhaps, but Marie will still sign a carnal intimidation complaint against you. It's one of my conditions to refrain from divorcing her." "Clear, Marie?" I inquired, turning to her. Marie gazed from me to Harry, her expression fraught with fear. She remained silent. "Allow me to elucidate," I addressed them both. "I have no intention of utilizing any of these documents. They serve as my insurance, Harry, in the event you consider shirking your financial responsibilities to your two children, or entertain the notion of disclosing their true paternity." I handed Marie the carnal intimidation complaint drafted by my lawyer. "Sign it, Marie." Still visibly frightened, she silently accepted the pen from my hand and affixed her signature to the complaint at the bottom. "Now, Harry, we're nearing the end of today's meeting. I expect those signed documents back in my possession within 48 hours. You can bring them here to the house. And if you ever entertain any dark, insane notions like injuring me, rest assured that several copies of your incriminating notes and love letters to Marie are securely stored, with instructions for their exposure should anything happen to me." With a tone of contempt, I concluded, locking eyes with him. Taking Marie's hand, I guided her back into the office and seated her. I had never seen her like this before, She trembled with horror. "It's all right, Marie. I would never damage you. There's no need to be afraid." "My God, Bill, what's gotten into you? How could you do this to Harry?" she exclaimed. I regarded her with some surprise. "You don't understand, Marie. Don't you see what he's done to you, to us? It's despicable and unjust." She blushed. "Yes, I see. It's just, you seem so angry, like you've lost control." Having no immediate response, I remained silent for a moment. "Marie, I've told you I won't divorce you, but our marriage won't continue the same way. From now on, things will be drastically different. Do you understand?" "Yes, Bill. I'll do anything to make things right. What have I done to you?" she pleaded. "All right," I relented. "Let's establish a couple of conditions. Within 2 weeks, you'll find a new job. I won't tolerate you seeing Harry every day at work. And it goes without saying, you'll have no personal contact with him ever again. No touching, kissing, lovemaking, calls, emails, nothing. Furthermore, if our marriage persists, it'll be on a wholly new basis. I refuse to endure your bad moods, your aloofness. I expect you to be a joyful, kind, loving wife every day. Your actions will demonstrate your love for me and your gratitude for our marriage. That same wild, passionate closeness you shared solely with Harry, I expect to share with me now. I anticipate seeing you in the hot lingerie I've never witnessed, tucked away in your drawer." I glanced at her pointedly, and she averted her gaze in shame. "And I expect you to be eager and willing whenever I desire closeness. If you truly love me, Marie, you have much lost time to compensate for." She crossed the room and knelt at my feet, embracing my legs tightly and looking up at me. "I love you, Bill, more than words can express. I'll prove it to you, I promise." I observed her tear-stained face, her frightened eyes. Somewhere within me, fragments of the love and devotion I held for this woman lingered, yet they were overshadowed, rendered insignificant by my fury at her selfishness and deceit. She deserved whatever consequences awaited her. Softening my tone slightly, I said, "Listen, Marie, in 4 weeks, your social dinner will take place. Let's use these weeks to start anew, to forge something different, perhaps even better from our marriage. If all goes well, the dinner will be a celebration of our new beginning. What do you say?" She nodded, holding onto my legs tightly. "Yes, Bill. Thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance. I'll be whatever you need me to be." I drew her close, and she showered me with tears and kisses. "Give me 10 minutes to freshen up, and then I'll start making things right," she said, rising with a smile. After she left, I relaxed in my chair, amused as I watched Marie bend over backward to please me. The next 4 weeks were bound to be enjoyable. I was a bit surprised she didn't notice what I didn't do, ask her anything about the affair's details. The whole evening must have been such a shock that she didn't have time to dwell on it. But honestly, I didn't ask because I simply didn't care. I was finished with Marie, even if she didn't realize it yet. Entering the bedroom minutes later, I found the bed made, the lights dimmed, and Marie lying in a revealing red nightgown. She had freshened up, looking as stunning as ever, albeit visibly nervous. I noticed a bottle of lube on the nightstand. "Where are you?" she purred, her voice trembling slightly. "Come to me." I joined her, shedding my clothes, and we embraced, kissing passionately. Her body was eager, and she moved with excitement. Whether it was genuine or an act, I enjoyed it. Despite my anger toward Marie, I found myself immersing in pleasure with her. She had a beautiful body, and her impatience was exhilarating, especially after years of indifference. I lay back and let her take charge, which she seemed happy to do. Afterward, she turned off the light and cuddled up to me under the blanket. She kissed my neck gently and whispered, "Sleep well." Drifting off, I anticipated receiving similar attention over the next 4 weeks. I genuinely enjoyed the subsequent weeks as Marie dedicated herself to rebuilding our marriage. The next morning, she woke me with a cheerful smile and a loving kiss, offering some love-making morning pleasure. Before breakfast, I watched with interest as Marie went above and beyond her usual routine to prepare the children for their day. That evening, I returned home to an unusual meal Marie had decided to cook from a cookbook recipe. Though the kids weren't fans, I enjoyed it, and Marie took charge to ensure they bathed and went to bed on time so we could enjoy our evening. Our nightly encounters were a refreshing change. Marie wore another enticing nightgown, and we indulged in unhurried closeness. Her enthusiasm, affection, and energy remained consistent. Despite my inner turmoil, I couldn't help but observe how we portrayed a happy newlywed couple each day. Marie's affection remained steadfast. She exuded cheerfulness and assistance in the mornings, and she was equally playful with our children and love-making moments. The allure of new, seductive lingerie gained my full endorsement, and we explored several exciting new positions, finding some to be thoroughly satisfying. My life resembled a joyful illusion, though I harbored no trust in my wife, seething with anger beneath my facade of contentment, merely feigning reciprocal affection. Harry's signed papers arrived promptly in my mailbox, followed by Marie's swift consent to adoption, facilitated by my lawyer. That same week, he orchestrated a private hearing with a judge, and within 10 days, the legal adoption was finalized. Subsequently, my lawyer handled the divorce proceedings. One morning at work, Denise Reynolds, a colleague with whom I occasionally collaborated, paid me an unexpected visit. At 28, she was 5 years my junior and undeniably attractive. While her occasional flirtatious remarks hadn't caught my serious attention before, she was definitely someone I considered in my circle of potential partners. To my surprise, Denise's visit wasn't work-related. "Bill," she said, "you seem different lately. Have you been working out or something? You look younger or fitter." "Thanks for noticing, Denise," I replied with a smile, then impulsively added, "Actually, it's something else entirely, but not something I can discuss here. Perhaps we could grab lunch today?" "Sounds good," she agreed. We went to the salad bar, then took our lunches to a table in the park and enjoyed the sun while we ate. "The change you've noticed is probably due to the fact that my marriage is falling apart," I explained. She looked puzzled. "And this makes you look better? Explain, please." I offered her a condensed version of my situation, admitting, "My wife has been cheating on me with a coworker for some time now. I intervened, but I've already made up my mind to leave her in a few weeks. Meanwhile, she's treating me like royalty, both in and out of the bedroom. That's the difference you've noticed today." Denise regarded me thoughtfully. "I'm impressed with how you're handling it," she remarked. "When I found out about my ex's infidelity, I nearly fell apart. It took me months to regain my composure." "I'm sorry to hear that," I responded. "I didn't know you went through something similar. But right now, I'm taking charge of my situation. It's going to unfold on my terms, not someone else's. That's what's keeping me going." Once again muttering, "What the hell," to myself, I remarked that one of the perks of my situation was knowing that although I wasn't officially single yet, I soon would be. Consequently, I felt no need to hold back my admiration for the delightful lady beside me in the park. I glanced at her with a smile, causing her to blush slightly before looking away and then back at me. "Gosh, Bill, you've put me in a bit of a spot here. I didn't realize it was so straightforward," she said. "I'm sorry, Denise, but you're just so lovely and amusing. I've been drawn to you since we first met. It's just that, until now, it felt taboo to bring it up. Any chance you'd join me for dinner on Saturday? I know this charming little Italian spot with a view of the river," I proposed. She regarded me earnestly. "Bill, I like you too, and being with you has always been effortless. Can I trust you? Is your marriage truly over, or is this just a ploy to get into my pants? Forgive me, but I've been through this scenario before." "Denise, I've always been honest with you, and as you're aware, I've never made advances before. I'm ending things with Marie in about 2 weeks and filing for divorce the same day. There's no turning back now, but I'll understand if you want to push me away. I'll just be a tad disappointed," I confessed. She smiled. "No, Bill. Since you've made the offer, I'm ready to accept it before you change your mind." Her gaze met mine intensely, and after a brief hesitation, I leaned forward, and we shared a gentle, tender kiss. It wasn't fiery or passionate, but it felt like a beautiful promise. Afterward, I beamed at her like an ecstatic child. When I informed my wife of my plans for a date on Saturday night, it brought out the worst in me. I made it crystal clear that I'd be going out with another woman and expected her to stay home with the kids. "Bill," Marie was shocked, on the verge of tears. "But I've tried so hard. Think of something to salvage our marriage. How can you see someone else?" "It's simple, Marie. Not only did you see someone else, but you also had an affair with him behind my back for 6 years. You've been making an effort lately, and I appreciate that. But it doesn't mean you automatically deserve my unwavering loyalty. It's pretty evident that I'll need to find happiness elsewhere for a while before we can even consider reconciliation," I retorted. She began to cry softly. "Will you sleep with her?" she asked. "No, but I can. And that's something you'll have to come to terms with. If it hurts you, maybe it'll help you understand the pain you've caused me," I concluded, ending the conversation as I left the room. My initial outings with Denise were delightful, yet cautious, as we both proceeded with care. We savored the moments, sensing there was more than mere physical attraction between us. We conversed, laughed, vented about co-workers, shared childhood stories, and simply grew acquainted. It felt natural and effortless, occasionally evoking memories of my early days with Marie, a thought I tried to push aside despite the pang of sadness it brought. Following our third dinner together, as I opened Denise's car door outside her apartment, she softly inquired, "Do you want to come in?" We understood the implication, and instantly, desire surged through me. Upon entering, she embraced me eagerly, and we kissed and hugged passionately, like infatuated teenagers. She paused for a moment, pulling back slightly, and expressed, "Seriously, I really want this, Bill, but I'm quite nervous. It's been a while. Please be gentle and patient with me." "Of course," I reassured her with a smile, lifting her gently. "Which way to your bedroom?" Closeness with Denise was remarkable, yet markedly different from my recent experiences with Marie. Initially reserved, Denise allowed me to explore and caress her body at my own pace. Despite her initial shyness, her beauty captivated me, and every moment with her was cherished. Our first encounter was tender, unhurried, and brimming with affection, a stark contrast to the passionate encounters I shared with Marie. It felt like two individuals genuinely caring for each other and finding happiness together. Afterward, Denise kissed me tenderly and asked if I could stay the night, to which I gladly agreed, and we drifted off to sleep wrapped in each other's arms. The following morning, Denise seemed slightly embarrassed again, and though we refrained from lovemaking, we bid farewell with sincere tenderness, exchanging several tender kisses. With only a few days remaining until my impending wedding night with Marie, I chose not to divulge my plans to Denise, but assured her of my imminent divorce proceedings. Upon returning home around 9:30 that Saturday morning, I found Marie quietly weeping at the kitchen table, clearly aware of how I had spent the previous night. Though I feigned sympathy more than I truly felt, I tenderly embraced her. "I'm sorry, Marie. I understand how you're feeling, believe me." "Oh, Bill, this is just awful. The mere thought of you with another woman tears me apart. I've been so selfish all these years. How could I not consider your feelings and the impact of my actions?" Looking at me, she added, "Thank you. Thank you for giving me another chance." Marie's own significant night, much like mine, was fast approaching, and to some extent I couldn't help but feel a twinge of regret. The past 4 weeks with Marie, including the fulfilling closeness we shared, had been memorable, and I would miss them. However, nothing she did manage to quell my resentment and fury. Her profound betrayal exceeded any attempt at reconciliation. Upon reflection, my heart harbored only a minuscule amount of love for her and a scant drop of sympathy for her impending fate. While collaborating on a PowerPoint presentation for her speech, I clandestinely crafted my own rendition. It wasn't identical to hers. I needed to conceal Harry's identity as the children's father. Nevertheless, the overall strategy remained unchanged. Using a sequence of photographs and captivating videos, I arranged the laptop so that Marie's presentation would appear whenever she used it. Yet, with a specific key combination, notably including, "of course," I could lock her presentation and substitute it with my own special file. In the days leading up to the event and on the evening itself, Marie nervously inquired if I had erased the dreadful file she encountered 4 weeks earlier. With a tender smile each time, I reassured her it was gone. I would then demonstrate that her presentation was intact and would seamlessly play with a simple click. The final days at home were particularly bittersweet. Marie seemed increasingly convinced she was regaining my affection, her devoted gestures appearing more composed, yet tinged with desperation. Her anguish upon realizing I spent the entire night with Denise only fueled her determination. Knowing our charade was nearing its conclusion, I savored every fleeting moment. When the pivotal evening arrived, we arrived early, me donning a rented tuxedo and Marie stunning in a black evening gown with delicate spaghetti straps accentuating her neck and shoulders. We ran through her PowerPoint presentation twice to ensure everything was flawless. As she leaned over to stow her purse beneath the podium, I swiftly input the key combination, signaling that everything was in place. And as anticipated, everything unfolded precisely as I had orchestrated. We enjoyed a pleasant dinner, engaging in friendly conversation with our friends at the table. The initial greetings were somewhat dull, but then Marie was warmly introduced by the outgoing president. Nervously, she made her way to the podium amidst general applause. According to my watch, her excitement and happiness lasted precisely 54 seconds, the time between the start of the PowerPoint file and the moment her audience was confronted with still photos of her infidelity. Marie didn't freeze or spill her water, but she turned to me with horror and disbelief before frantically attempting to halt the file's playback, albeit unsuccessfully. As video clips began playing, Filling the room with sound, she stood there, visibly distressed, her face flushed, gaze fixed on the floor. She made no attempt to respond as the audience's surprise turned into a mix of indignation and laughter, ignoring the lewd remarks hurled at her as the crowd dispersed. Minutes later, we found ourselves alone. I sat quietly, observing her from across the table. Finally, she uttered the question straight out of my nightmares. "Bill, how could you do this to me? I thought you loved me." "Yes, Marie," I replied calmly. "In these past few weeks, I've loved you just as much as you loved me 6 years ago." I approached the podium and handed her several folded sheets of paper. "I'm filing for divorce. Consider yourself served. If you stay in town, you'll have joint custody of Katie and Brian. Otherwise, I'll fight for full custody, and you know I'll win." As I neared the door, her scream of anger and pain pierced the air. "But you promised you wouldn't divorce me. You said we could work things out." I turned to face her. "Yes, Marie," I said firmly. "So I suppose after all these years of you deceiving me, I deceived myself."
Story 4.
The rhythmic clicking of tools against metal-filled Tony Marshall's auto shop, a sound as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. At 36, he built his reputation in Houston's automotive scene through unwavering dedication and honest work. His weathered hands moved with practiced precision as he leaned over the engine of Mrs. Henderson's Chevy, the afternoon sun streaming through the open garage door. "Almost done, Mrs. Henderson," he called out, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Just need to check the timing belt one more time." The elderly woman sat in the waiting area, her silver hair neatly styled despite the Houston humidity. "Take your time, Tony. I trust your work more than those dealership mechanics. You always do right by people." Tony smiled, though his eyes remained focused on the task at hand. Trust meant everything in his line of work, just as it did in marriage. 8 years with Morgan had taught him that, or at least he thought it had. The shop phone rang, and his apprentice Mike answered it. "Marshall's Auto Repair." "Yes, ma'am." "One moment." He covered the receiver. "Hey, Tony, Morgan's on the line." Tony straightened up, wiping his hands on his work rag. The mention of his wife's name sent an uncomfortable twinge through his chest, a feeling he'd been experiencing more frequently lately. He took the phone, careful not to get grease on it. "Hey, babe, everything okay?" Morgan's voice came through slightly distorted, with the sound of traffic in the background. "Just letting you know I won't be home for dinner. Going out with some friends from work." Tony's jaw tightened. "Third time this week." "Again? I thought we were going to try that new barbecue place tonight." "Oh, right." A pause. "Rain check? I really need this time with the girls. You understand, don't you?" Before he could respond, the distinct sound of a male laugh carried through the phone. Morgan quickly spoke over it. "Got to go. Don't wait up." The line went dead before Tony could say goodbye. He stared at the phone for a moment, that familiar unease growing stronger in his gut. Mike watched him with concern. "Everything all right, boss?" Tony hung up the phone with deliberate care. "Fine. Let's finish up Mrs. Henderson's car." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of oil changes and brake repairs. Tony threw himself into his work, finding comfort in the predictability of engines. Cars made sense. If something was wrong, you could diagnose it, fix it, test it. Marriage, he was learning, wasn't nearly so straightforward. The BY closing time. The setting sun painted the shop in shades of orange and red. Tony sat at his desk, reviewing the day's invoices, but his mind kept wandering to Morgan. The changes in her behavior had been subtle at first, like hairline cracks in an engine block, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention, that IT had started 3 months ago. The constant texting was the first sign, her phone becoming an extension of her hand. She'd angle the screen away from him when he walked by, quickly switching apps or turning it face down. Then came the girls' nights that seemed to multiply like rabbits and the new clothes that she never wore around him. Tony closed the invoice book and locked up the shop. The drive home took him past their favorite date night restaurant, now gathering dust in their routine. When was the last time they'd had a real conversation? One that didn't involve Morgan, checking her phone every 2 minutes or making excuses to be somewhere else. The house was dark when he pulled into the driveway, gravel crunching under his truck's tires. Inside, the silence felt heavy, accusatory. Tony moved through the rooms, turning on lights, trying to make the space feel less empty. A half-empty wine glass sat on the kitchen counter, Morgan's liquid courage, becoming more frequent these days that he opened the fridge, staring at the containers of leftover chili he'd made 2 days ago. Morgan used to love his cooking, would brag about it to her friends. Now she barely touched her plate when she was home for dinner, the sound of his phone ringing cut through the silence. For a moment, hope flared. Maybe Morgan was calling to say she'd be home early. But the caller ID showed Mike's name. "Boss, sorry to bother you at home, but that parts order for the Rodriguez truck came in wrong. They sent brake pads for an 85 model instead of 95. Tony welcomed the distraction. I'll call the supplier first thing tomorrow. We still have time before Rodriguez needs it back." "Thanks, boss. And hey," Mike hesitated. "You know you can talk to me if something's eating at you, right? Known you 15 years now. Appreciate it, Mike." Tony's voice was gruff with emotion he refused to show. "See you tomorrow." After hanging up, Tony walked upstairs to their bedroom. Morgan's perfume lingered in the air, the scent different from what she used to wear. He opened her dresser drawer, telling himself he was just putting away laundry. The sight of unfamiliar lingerie, tags still attached, made his stomach turn. He'd never seen her wear any of it. The sound of a text notification made him jump. His phone showed a message from Mrs. Henderson. "Car's running perfectly. Thank you for always being so thorough, Tony." He smiled despite himself. At least in his work, things still made sense. He could still trust in the solid reality of metal and machinery, in the satisfaction of a job well done. The rest of the evening passed slowly. Tony tried watching TV, but couldn't focus on the game. He cleaned the kitchen, organized his tools for tomorrow. Anything to keep his hands busy and his mind from wandering to where Morgan might be, or who she might be with that AT-11. He heard her car pull up. The front door opened, bringing with it the smell of cigarette smoke. Another new development, since Morgan had always hated smoking. Her heels clicked on the hardwood as she made her way to the kitchen, humming slightly. "Oh!" She startled when she saw him sitting at the counter. "I thought you'd be in bed." Tony studied her carefully. Her makeup was touched up, but her lipstick was gone. Her hair had been restyled. The dress, another new one, had a slight wrinkle on the side, as if it had been bunched up. "Had some paperwork to catch up on," he lied, watching her movements. "Good time with the girls?" Morgan busied herself getting a glass of water, not quite meeting his eyes. "Yeah, just what I needed. Though I'm exhausted now. Think I'll head up to bed." "Morgan." His voice made her pause at the bottom of the stairs. "Is everything okay? With us?" She turned, and for a moment he caught something in her expression. Guilt? Fear? But it was gone so fast he might have imagined it. "Of course, honey." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Everything's fine. You worry too much." Tony watched her climb the stairs, listened to her go through her bedtime routine. The distance between them felt like a chasm, growing wider with each passing day. In the quiet of their kitchen, he made a decision. Starting tomorrow, he'd pay closer attention. Something was wrong with his marriage, and like any good mechanic, he needed to diagnose the problem before he could fix it, or before it destroyed everything he'd built his life around. The next few weeks at Marshall's Auto Repair took on a different rhythm. Tony started tracking patterns, his mechanic's mind breaking down Morgan's behavior like he would diagnose a complex engine problem. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons became his focus, the times when Morgan's absences were most consistent. "Looking a bit distracted there, boss," Mike commented one morning as Tony checked the scheduling book for the third time. "That timing chain giving you trouble?" Tony shook his head, closing the book with more force than necessary. "Just planning ahead. We've got the Rodriguez truck coming in next week." But his mind wasn't on the Rodriguez truck. It was on Morgan's phone, which she'd left on the kitchen counter that morning while showering, a rare mistake on her part. He'd seen a text notification flash across the screen. "Can't wait to see you today." Same time, the sender's name had been a simple J. That evening, Tony sat in his garage, methodically cleaning his tools while piecing together the puzzle. Morgan's me time always fell on the same days. Her phone was now permanently set to vibrate, notifications hidden from the lock screen. She'd changed her email password last week, claiming she'd seen some suspicious activity. The sound of Morgan's car pulling into the driveway broke his concentration. She walked into the garage, her designer heels clicking on the concrete. "There you are," she said, her voice carrying that artificial cheerfulness he'd grown to hate. I picked up dinner from that Italian place you like. Tony placed his wrench back in its designated spot. Thought you had yoga on Thursdays. A flicker of something anxiety crossed her face. Oh, class was canceled. Instructor got sick. That's too bad. Tony kept his voice neutral. Guess that means you can join me for lunch at the shop next Thursday instead? Morgan's smile faltered slightly. Oh, honey, Thursdays are my errands day. You know that. Right. The errands. Tony stood up, wiping his hands. Funny thing is, I drove by the yoga studio today. Lot was full. Class seemed to be going strong. The color drained from Morgan's face, but she recovered quickly. I'm at the evening class. The morning instructor is sick. You told me last week you switched to morning classes because the evening ones were too crowded. The silence between them crackled with tension. Morgan's hand went to her phone, a nervous habit she developed. Are you checking up on me? Her voice took on an edge of indignation. Spying on me now? Wouldn't need to if you just tell me the truth. Tony moved past her into the house. But I guess that's too much to ask these days. What's that supposed to mean? Morgan followed him into the kitchen, her heels striking the floor like angry exclamation points. Tony turned to face her, noting how she kept the kitchen island between them. It means I'm not stupid, Morgan. Something's going on, and we both know it. Nothing is going on. She threw her hands up. God, you're being paranoid. This is exactly why I need time to myself. You're suffocating me. The Italian takeout sat forgotten on the counter as they faced each other across the kitchen. Tony noticed Morgan's hands trembling slightly as she gripped her phone. Suffocating you? His voice was dangerously quiet. 8 years of marriage, and now I'm suffocating you? Morgan's phone buzzed. She glanced at it reflexively, and that same soft smile he'd noticed weeks ago touched her lips for a split second before she caught herself. I need some air. She grabbed her purse. Don't wait up. Tony watched her leave, listening to her car start and pull away. Once the sound faded, he walked upstairs to their home office. Morgan had left her laptop open, another careless mistake. The browser was still logged into her email that he hesitated for a moment, his conscience warring with his need to know the truth. Then he remembered that smile when her phone buzzed, and he began to search. The evidence was there in fragments. Emails deleted but not emptied from the trash folder, calendar entries with vague labels like appointment and meeting, all falling on Tuesdays and Thursdays. One email caught his attention. A confirmation for a hotel reservation downtown. Dated for next Tuesday. Tony closed the laptop and walked to their bedroom. He opened Morgan's side of the closet, finally allowing himself to notice what he'd been trying to ignore. The new dresses, the expensive lingerie, the shoes that she never wore around him. Everything pointed to one conclusion, but he needed absolute proof. He needed to be certain before he acted. When Morgan came home late that night, Tony was already in bed, pretending to sleep. He listened to her shower, smelling an unfamiliar cologne mixing with the steam. His hands clenched the sheets as he fought the urge to confront her right then. No. He needed to be smart about this. Needed to catch her in a way she couldn't deny or explain away. Tuesday was 5 days away. He'd wait, watch, and plan. The next few days passed in a blur of tension and forced normalcy. Tony went through the motions at work, his mind constantly running scenarios. Morgan seemed oblivious to his inner turmoil, continuing her routine of secret texts and transparent lies. Sunday night, she announced she had an important client meeting on Tuesday afternoon. Tony nodded, watching her choose her outfit, a new red dress he'd never seen before. Hope the meeting goes well, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Morgan paused in front of her mirror, smoothing the dress against her body. Thanks, honey. It's really important for my career. Tony turned away before she could see his expression. Important for her career. Right. He'd see just how important on Tuesday. Monday dragged by, each hour feeling like a year. Tony threw himself into his work, rebuilding in transmission with such intensity that Mike asked if he was trying to set a speed record. Just focus, Tony replied, not looking up from the engine block. Sometimes you need to strip everything down to see what's really broken. Tuesday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Morgan kissed him goodbye, her lips barely brushing his cheek before she hurried out the door. Tony watched her leave, knowing that in a few hours, everything would change, that he had a plan. A simple one, really. He'd close the shop early, drive downtown, and find out exactly what kind of client meeting his wife was having. As he worked through the morning appointments, Tony's mind kept drifting to the hotel confirmation he'd seen. The Westbrook Hotel, one of Houston's more discreet upscale establishments. Perfect for secret meetings, early afternoon. His hands were steady, but his heart felt like it might burst from his chest. He told Mike he wasn't feeling well and needed to close early. "You sure you're okay to drive, boss?" Mike's concern was evident. "You've been off all week." Tony managed a tight smile. "Just need to take care of something. Lock up for me." As he climbed into his truck, Tony caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. The face looking back at him was hard, determined. Whatever he found today would change everything. But he was Tony Marshall, and he faced his problems head-on. He started the engine, his decision made. It was time to find out exactly what Morgan did during her me time. The Westbrook Hotel rose before Tony like a glass and steel monument to secrets. He parked his truck in the public garage across the street, his mechanic's eyes automatically noting a black Mercedes with custom wheels in one of the reserved spots. The kind of car that would look out of place in his neighborhood. Tony checked his watch. 2:45 p.m. Morgan's client meeting would be in full swing. His fingers gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white as memories of happier times flashed through his mind. Their wedding day, Morgan's smile as they bought their first house, quiet Sunday mornings sharing coffee, and dreams all lies. Every moment tainted by whatever he was about to discover. The walk to their house took 15 minutes. Tony had decided against confronting them at the hotel. Too public, too many variables. Instead, he confirmed his suspicions and now waited. Morgan always came home after these meetings to shower and change before her regular evening routine. Today, that routine would change forever. Their street looked different somehow, as if the weight of his knowledge had altered the very landscape of his life. He noticed Morgan's car wasn't in the driveway yet, but that familiar black Mercedes was parked half a block down, its tinted windows hiding its occupant. Tony's jaw clenched. The bastard had followed her home. He walked past his front door, making a show of checking his phone, then circled around through their neighbor's yard. The spare key hidden in the garage gave him silent entry through the back door. The house was quiet, but not empty quiet. He could hear movement upstairs, soft footsteps, a laugh that made his blood boil. Morgan's voice drifted down, playful and intimate in a way she hadn't been with him in months. Tony moved up the stairs with deliberate calm, each step bringing more clarity. The bedroom door was partially open, spilling afternoon light into the hallway. Morgan's red dress lay crumpled on the floor outside. Time seemed to slow as Tony reached the door. He could turn back now, pretend he hadn't seen what he was about to see. But that wasn't who he was. Tony Marshall faced problems head-on. No matter how much they hurt, he pushed the door open. The scene burned itself into his memory with brutal clarity. Morgan was on their bed. The bed they'd bought together after their 5th anniversary, with a man Tony had never seen before. They were tangled in the sheets, their bodies moving together in the most intimate betrayal possible. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then Morgan's eyes met his, widening in horror as recognition dawned. The man, tall, well-built, probably early 40s, was still moving, unaware of their audience. Morgan's scream shattered the moment. She scrambled backward, clutching sheets to her naked body, her face draining of color. "Tony! Oh, God, Tony!" The man finally realized something was wrong and turned, revealing a handsome, arrogant face now twisted in shock. He opened his mouth to speak, but Tony was already moving. The first punch caught the man square in the jaw, the impact reverberating up Tony's arm. Years of working with heavy machinery had built strength that sent the stranger sprawling off the bed. Tony grabbed him by his expensive shirt collar before he could recover. "You think you can walk into my house and do this?" Tony's voice was barely recognizable, thick with rage and disgust. He slammed the man against the wall, following up with another punch to the gut that left him gasping. "Tony, please!" Morgan was sobbing now, still wrapped in their sheets. "Stop! You'll kill him." "Shut up, Morgan." Tony didn't even look at her, his focus entirely on the man who dared touch his wife. "You're just as pathetic as he is." The stranger, Jack Ellison, as Tony would later learn, tried to fight back, throwing a wild punch that Tony easily dodged. Tony responded with a devastating combination that sent Jack crashing to the floor, blood streaming from his nose. "Listen, man," Jack gasped, raising his hands. "We can talk about this." "Talk." Tony grabbed him by the throat. "Like how you talked your way into my wife's pants? Like how you talked her into betraying everything we built?" Morgan had scrambled off the bed, clutching a sheet around herself. "Tony, it's not what you think." "Not what I think." Tony laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I think it's exactly what it looks like. I think you're both exactly what you appear to be. Cheaters, liars, garbage." He dragged Jack toward the stairs, the other man stumbling and protesting as he tried to grab his scattered clothes. Tony was relentless, his grip iron-tight as he hauled Jack down the steps. Each impact of Jack's body against the stairs felt like justice. Tony threw open the front door and hurled Jack onto the lawn, watching with grim satisfaction as the man sprawled half-naked on the grass. "If I ever see you near my house again," Tony's voice was deadly calm, "what happened today will feel like a gentle warning." He turned back inside, leaving Jack to scramble to his car in his underwear, blood still dripping from his face. The Mercedes peeled away from the curb. Tires squealing in retreat, Morgan stood at the top of the stairs, now wearing a robe, her face streaked with tears and mascara. "Tony, please, let me explain." "Explain?" He cut her off, his voice sharp enough to make her flinch. "There's nothing to explain. You have 1 hour to pack your things and get out. You're done here." "But Tony, our marriage. He laughed again, the sound harsh and broken. "You killed that the moment you let him into our bed. 1 hour, Morgan. Anything left after that goes in the trash." He walked into the kitchen, ignoring her pleas and sobs. With mechanical precision, he pulled out a beer from the fridge and sat at the counter, his back to the stairs. He could hear her moving around upstairs, crying and throwing things into bags. Tony took a long pull from his beer, his knuckles beginning to sting where they'd connected with Jack's face. 8 years of marriage, demolished in an afternoon. He thought about all the signs he'd noticed, all the red flags he'd filed away. Part of him wanted to rage, to break things, to scream at the unfairness of it all, but Tony Marshall wasn't built that way. He'd faced this betrayal like he faced everything else in his life head-on, with determination and grit. Morgan had made her choice. Now she'd live with the consequences upstairs. He could hear her phone ringing, probably Jack checking on her. Tony's grip tightened on his beer bottle, but he remained seated. Let her deal with her lover now. She'd made her bed literally and figuratively, and now she'd lie in it. The hour passed slowly, marked by the sound of drawers opening and closing, hangers scraping across rails, and Morgan's occasional sobs. Tony sat perfectly still, his beer long since warm and forgotten. As his marriage crumbled around him, finally, Morgan appeared at the bottom of the stairs, 2 large suitcases and a duffel bag in tow. Her face was puffy from crying, her carefully applied makeup now a tragic mask. I'll come back for the rest of my things," she said quietly. Tony didn't turn around. "Anything left here tomorrow goes in the garbage. Just like our vows did." He heard her sharp intake of breath, followed by the sound of wheels rolling across hardwood. The front door opened, then closed. A car started, probably an Uber, since Jack's Mercedes was long gone. Only when he was sure she was gone did Tony finally move. He walked upstairs to their bedroom, his bedroom now, and stripped the bed with mechanical efficiency, stuffing the sheets into a garbage bag. The room still smelled of sex and Morgan's perfume, a combination that made his stomach turn. Opening the windows, Tony let the cool evening air flow in. He'd sleep on the couch tonight. Tomorrow he'd buy a new mattress, new sheets, new everything. Tonight, though, he needed to make some calls. Morgan had destroyed their marriage, but Tony would make damn sure she didn't destroy him. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through their shared contacts. It was time everyone knew exactly who Morgan Marshall really was. Dawn broke over Houston, painting the sky in shades of red that matched Tony's mood. He hadn't slept, spending the night on the couch while his mind replayed yesterday's events on an endless loop. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen as he made his first call of the day. "Mike, need you to open the shop today." Tony's voice was rough from lack of sleep. "Got some personal business to handle." Everything okay, boss? Mike's concern carried through the phone. You've been off lately. Morgan's gone. Tony's grip tightened on his coffee mug. Caught her cheating yesterday. The silence on the other end stretched for a moment. Jesus, Tony. I'm sorry, man. You need anything? Yeah. Need you to spread the word at the shop. Anyone asks, tell them exactly what happened. No sugarcoating. You got it, boss. Want me to come by after work? Help you clear out her stuff? Tony walked to the window, watching the sunrise. No, this is something I need to do myself. After hanging up, Tony climbed the stairs to their bedroom. His bedroom now. Morgan's clothes still hung in the closet, her perfumes and makeup scattered across the vanity. Everything that had once been familiar now felt toxic. The doorbell rang as he was pulling garbage bags from under the sink. Through the front window, he saw Morgan standing on the porch, wearing yesterday's clothes and looking like she hadn't slept either. Tony opened the door, but blocked the entrance with his body. Morgan's eyes were red and puffy. Her designer outfit wrinkled from spending the night, who knows where. Tony, please, she started, her voice trembling. Can we just talk about this? Talk. Tony's laugh was harsh. Like how you talk to me about your client meetings? Or how about your yoga classes? I know I messed up. Morgan reached for his arm, but Tony stepped back. But 8 years of marriage has to mean something. It meant something to me. Tony's voice was ice cold. Right up until I found you screwing another man in our bed. That was a mistake. Jack doesn't mean anything to me. Jack. Tony cut her off. So that's his name? Good to know who I knocked around yesterday. Morgan's face paled. He's talking about pressing charges, Tony. Let him try. I've got witnesses who'll testify. I found him in my house, in my bed with my wife. Tony smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Wonder how that'll play out in court? Why are you being so cruel? Tears started falling down Morgan's cheeks. This isn't like you. And spreading your legs for another man wasn't like you. Guess we're both full of surprises. Tony reached behind the door and grabbed a garbage bag. Here's some of your stuff. The rest will be on the lawn in an hour. You can't just throw my things out. Actually, I can. House is in my name, remember? You insisted on keeping your money separate when we bought it. Tony's smile grew colder. Funny how that worked out. Morgan's tears stopped abruptly. Fine. I'll call the police. Go ahead. I'm sure they'd love to hear how you and your boyfriend were trespassing in my house. Tony leaned forward slightly. Or maybe they'd be interested in those pills I found in your purse last month. The ones without a prescription. Morgan's face went white. You wouldn't. Try me. You've got 1 hour to get your stuff before it hits the curb. And Morgan. He caught her eyes. Better hope Jack's worth it, because after today, you're dead to me. He shut the door in her face, ignoring her renewed protests. Through the window, he watched her pace the porch for a few minutes before storming off to her car. Tony spent the next hour methodically packing Morgan's belongings into garbage bags. Designer clothes, expensive shoes, jewelry, everything went in except what he'd given her over the years. Those items he set aside for donation. The phone rang constantly. Morgan's friends, her family, mutual acquaintances. Tony answered each call with brutal honesty. Hey, Lisa. Yeah, Morgan won't be at book club anymore. Why? Because I caught her cheating yesterday. With some guy named Jack. Feel free to spread the word. Mr. Martinez, sorry to hear about your daughter's choices. But no, I won't be reconsidering. Morgan made her bed literally, and now she can lie in it. Dave? Yeah, you might want to ask your wife about those girls' nights with Morgan. Turns out they weren't all going to yoga. By noon, the front lawn was covered with black garbage bags. Tony stood in the doorway, watching as Morgan pulled up in her car. A police cruiser right behind her. The officers approached cautiously. Tony recognized them from working on their patrol cars. Mr. Marshall, Officer Rodriguez stepped forward. We got a call about a domestic dispute. No dispute here. Officer. Tony gestured to the bags. Just returning my cheating ex-wife's property. Found her with another man in my house yesterday. Rodriguez glanced at his partner, then back at Morgan. Ma'am, is this true? Morgan's face flushed. That's not. It's complicated. Actually, it's simple, Tony interrupted. House is in my name. I'm removing an unwanted person's belongings from my property. Everything she owns is there, unharmed. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Ma'am, If the house is in his name, he has the right to remove your belongings. As long as nothing is damaged, this is a civil matter. But he assaulted Jack. Morgan protested. The man I found trespassing in my house, in my bed. Tony raised an eyebrow. Want to file that report, Morgan? Tell them all about how your boyfriend broke into my house. Morgan's mouth snapped shut. The officers exchanged knowing looks. Ma'am, we suggest you take your belongings and handle this through proper legal channels, Rodriguez's partner said firmly. Unless you want to file a trespassing report about yesterday's incident. Morgan's shoulders slumped in defeat. No, I'll just take my things. Tony watched from the doorway as Morgan and the officers loaded her belongings into her car. Each bag represented another piece of their life together. Now tainted and worthless, A.S. Morgan prepared to leave. She tried one last time. Tony, please. We can work through this. Go to counseling, start over. Like you worked through it with Jack. Tony's voice carried across the lawn. No second chances, Morgan. Not for this. He closed the door on her final plea, then walked to the kitchen and pulled out his phone. Time to make sure everyone in their social circle knew exactly what kind of person Morgan Marshall really was. The destruction of Morgan's life had begun, and Tony wouldn't stop until she felt even a fraction of the pain she'd caused him. The weekly neighborhood barbecue at the Wilsons' house had been a tradition for years. Tony hadn't planned to attend this Saturday, but Dan Wilson personally came to his shop to insist. People are talking, Tony, Dan said, leaning against a workbench. Better to face them head on. Let them hear the truth from you. Tony wiped his hands on a shop rag, considering. Not really in a social mood, Dan. Morgan's been telling her version to anyone who'll listen. Dan's expression hardened. Claims you were controlling, neglectful. Says that's why she turned to Jack. The wrench in Tony's hand creaked under his grip. That's so. Nobody who knows you believes it. But you need to set the record straight. That evening, Tony walked into the Wilsons' backyard, a six-pack of beer in hand. Conversations stuttered to a halt as heads turned. He could feel the weight of their stares, see the questions in their eyes. Lisa Cooper, Morgan's closest friend in the neighborhood, approached first. Tony, we've been so worried. Morgan told us what happened. Did she tell you about screwing her boyfriend in my bed? Tony's voice carried across the yard. Or did she skip that part? The silence turned heavy. Lisa's face flushed red. She said you were having problems. The only problem was Morgan keeping her legs closed. Tony cracked open a beer. But hey, maybe you could tell me more about those yoga classes you two went to. Funny how you both came home with different stories about them. Lisa's mouth opened and closed soundlessly before she retreated. Around the yard, people shifted uncomfortably, whispers starting to circulate. Betty Wilson appeared at Tony's side with a plate of food. Honey, I'm so sorry. We had no idea. Not your fault, Betty. Tony accepted the plate. Morgan fooled a lot of people, including me. Throughout the evening, the story spread like wildfire. Tony answered questions directly, sparing no details. When Morgan's name came up, he made sure everyone knew exactly what she'd done. Hey, Tony. Mark Reynolds, another neighbor, pulled him aside. Listen, man, Morgan came by our place yesterday, asking to stay with us for a few days. And Katie told her no, said we don't support cheaters. Mark clasped Tony's shoulder. Just wanted you to know we've got your back. The next week brought more revelations. Tony learned that several of their friends had suspected something, but hadn't wanted to get involved. He made sure they felt the full weight of their silence at the local coffee shop. He ran into Rebecca, Morgan's coworker. She tried to hurry past, but Tony called out to her. Rebecca, how's the office? Morgan still taking those long lunches with her clients? Rebecca froze, then turned slowly. The other customers watched with undisguised interest. Tony, I didn't know for sure. But you suspected? Tony's voice was pleasant, but his eyes were hard. All those times she came back late, lipstick smeared, clothes wrinkled. Must have been some intense business meetings. She made me promise not to say anything. Rebecca's voice quivered. Said it would ruin everything if anyone found out. Well, she was right about that. Tony smiled coldly. How's the office treating her now that everyone knows the truth? Rebecca looked away. She took a leave of absence. After the rumors started. Rumors? Tony laughed. You mean the truth? Feel free to share it. In fact, I insist. The destruction of Morgan's reputation continued methodically. Tony made sure every social circle, every mutual friend, every business contact knew the full story. He answered calls and messages with brutal honesty, never embellishing but never softening the truth either. That Morgan's attempts to maintain her social standing crumbled. Her usual lunch spots became uncomfortable as whispers followed her. Friends stopped returning her calls. Invitations dried up. One evening, Tony's phone rang. Morgan's mother. "Anthony, please." Patricia's voice trembled. "She's my daughter. She made a terrible mistake, but a mistake is forgetting to pay a bill, Patricia." Tony cut her off. What Morgan did was a choice. Multiple choices over months. She's saying you drove her to it. That you were cold, distant. Really? Tony's voice sharpened. Was I cold when I worked 60-hour weeks to buy her that car she wanted? Distant when I sat through every mindless social event she dragged me to? Tell me, Patricia, did she mention how many times she was working late while spreading her legs for Jack? A sharp intake of breath. Anthony, no, you don't get to act shocked. Your daughter destroyed our marriage. Now she gets to live with the consequences. Tony's grip on the phone tightened. And if you're smart, you'll stop trying to defend her. Unless you want people asking how you raised a daughter who thinks cheating is acceptable. The calls from Morgan's family stopped after that. Tony heard through the grapevine that even they had started distancing themselves, embarrassed by the scandal, to AT Church, where Morgan had always been active in community events. Her absence was noted. Tony attended regularly, accepting condolences and sharing his story when asked. Such a shame, Mrs. Peterson clucked after service. She seemed like such a good Christian woman. Appearances can be deceiving. Tony straightened his tie. Just like those long prayers she used to say while planning her next meetup with Jack. The whispers spread through the congregation. Morgan's name was quietly removed from committee lists and volunteer rosters, even at her job, where she'd built a successful career in real estate. The fallout was inevitable. Tony ran into her broker, Richard, at the gas station. Tough situation, Tony. Richard shook his head. Morgan was one of my best agents. Was? Client trust is everything in our business. Once word got around, Richard shrugged. Let's just say her numbers have taken a hit. Tony filled his tank, watching the numbers climb. Funny how actions have consequences, isn't it? She's talking about relocating. Richard hesitated. Starting fresh somewhere else. Running away. Tony replaced the pump. Seems about right for her. Always looking for the easy way out. As summer turned to fall, Morgan's carefully constructed social world lay in ruins. The women who'd once been her closest friends crossed the street to avoid her. Party invitations stopped. Her usual salon found excuses not to book her appointments. One rainy Tuesday, Tony spotted her eating alone at their old favorite restaurant. She sat in a corner booth, her designer clothes still perfect, but her posture defeated. When she saw him, she quickly asked for her check. The waiter approached Tony's table. "Mr. Marshall, your usual table?" "Actually," Tony smiled, watching Morgan hurry past. "I think I'll take that corner booth. Seems it just opened up." Morgan's world was crumbling, piece by piece, relationship by relationship. And Tony made sure he was there to witness every moment of her fall from grace. Tony sat across from his lawyer, Jim Baker, reviewing divorce papers in the dated but comfortable office. Morning light filtered through Venetian blinds, casting striped shadows across the mahogany desk. "She's asking for half of everything," Jim said, shuffling through documents. "Claims she contributed to the growth of your business through, and I quote, emotional and social support." Tony's laugh was sharp. Emotional support? While she was screwing around with Jack. Speaking of Jack Ellison, Jim leaned forward. He's dropped any talk of assault charges. Seems he doesn't want his name appearing in official documents. Married man, is he? With 3 kids and a seat on the board of his company. Jim smiled thinly. Amazing how quickly people like that disappear when their reputations are at stake. The door opened, and Jim's secretary poked her head in. "Mr. Marshall? Morgan's here for the mediation." Tony straightened his tie. "Let's get this over with." Morgan entered with her lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman named Rachel Klein. The contrast between Morgan's current appearance and her usual polished look was striking. Dark circles under her eyes, designer outfit slightly wrinkled, hands shaking as she sat down. Before we begin, Rachel started. My client would like to discuss the possibility of reconciliation. Not happening. Tony's voice was flat. We're here to divorce, not waste time. Morgan flinched. Tony, please. We could try counseling. The only counseling you need is to learn to keep your legs closed. Tony turned to Jim. Can we stick to business? Rachel's face tightened. Mr. Marshall, such hostile language is completely justified, Jim interrupted. Now, about these demands for half the business assets, the mediation deteriorated quickly. Morgan's claims of emotional neglect met Tony's cold recitation of facts. Dates, times, phone records, hotel receipts. Each piece of evidence made her shrink further into her chair. You've been tracking me? Morgan's voice quivered. Didn't need to. You left a trail a blind man could follow. Tony pulled out his phone. Want to explain these credit card charges at the Westbrook Hotel? Pretty expensive for yoga classes. Rachel tried to regain control. My client's personal choices, while regrettables. Tony leaned forward. How about criminal? Those prescription pills in her purse didn't have her name on them. Want to discuss that? Morgan's face went white. Rachel whispered urgently in her ear. We're willing to revise our demands. Rachel announced stiffly. Jim smiled. I thought you might be. The next hour was a methodical dismantling of Morgan's claims. The house was in Tony's name. The business predated their marriage. Her contributions? Minimal, especially compared to her expenditures. Fine. Morgan's voice cracked. I'll sign whatever you want. Just, can we keep this quiet? Tony stood, gathering his papers. Bit late for that, isn't it? Don't worry, though. Everyone already knows what you are. The court hearing 2 weeks later was brief, but brutal. Judge Martinez, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, reviewed the evidence with increasing disapproval. Mrs. Marshall, you claim your husband was emotionally unavailable. The judge peered over her glasses. Yet these credit card statements show regular date nights, vacations, gifts. It wasn't enough, Morgan tried to explain. I needed to sleep with another man in your marital bed? Judge Martinez's tone could have frozen fire. While your husband worked to provide the lifestyle you enjoyed? Morgan's lawyer attempted to intervene. Your Honor, my client acknowledges her mistakes. Mistakes? Tony's voice carried across the courtroom. A mistake is forgetting our anniversary. She made conscious choices over and over. The judge nodded. Indeed, Mr. Marshall, the house and business remains solely yours. Mrs. Marshall, given your infidelity and the prenuptial agreement you signed, your claims to these assets are denied. But where am I supposed to go? Morgan's composure finally broke. I can't afford. Perhaps Mr. Ellison can help. The judge's voice dripped sarcasm. Though I understand, he's suddenly unreachable. Funny how that works. Later, in the courthouse parking lot, Morgan made one last attempt. She caught up to Tony as he walked to his truck. I have nothing left, she pleaded. My job's falling apart. My friends won't talk to me. Even my parents are ashamed. You've taken everything. Tony turned slowly. I took nothing. You threw it all away, piece by piece, every time you spread your legs for Jack. I made a mistake, no? Tony's voice was steel. You made a choice. Every time you lied about working late. Every time you pretended to go to yoga. Every time you let him touch you. Those were choices. Tears streaked Morgan's makeup. What am I supposed to do now? Not my problem. Tony opened his truck door. Maybe try keeping your clothes on around married men. Seems like a good start. He drove away, leaving Morgan standing in the parking lot, her perfectly manicured hands clutching divorce papers that left her with nothing but regrets. That evening, Tony sat in his home office, reviewing the final divorce decree. 8 years of marriage, reduced to a stack of papers and a judge's signature. His phone buzzed with a text from Mike. Heard about court. Drink tonight? Tony smiled slightly. Throughout everything, his friend had stood by him. Rain check. Got plans? Those plans involved a bottle of whiskey and the last box of Morgan's photos, still sitting in the garage. One by one, he fed them into the fire pit in the backyard, watching as the flames consumed images of happier times. The woman in those photos was gone, replaced by someone he now saw clearly. Morgan had destroyed their marriage, but Tony had made sure she lost everything else in the process. No friends, no reputation, no assets, no respect. As the last photo curled and blackened in the flames, Tony raised his glass in a mock toast. Morgan had chosen her path. Now she could walk it alone. 3 months after the divorce, Tony's auto shop had never been busier. He'd landed several new corporate contracts, expanding his business beyond anything Morgan had seen during their marriage. The irony wasn't lost on him. Another fleet maintenance deal? Mike whistled as he reviewed the paperwork. Boss, we're going to need to hire more mechanics. Already ahead of you. Tony wiped his hands on a shop rag, studying the BMW he'd just finished servicing. Called the trade school. Got 3 apprentices starting next month. The bell over the door chimed. Tony looked up to see Lisa Cooper, Morgan's former best friend, shuffling awkwardly into the shop. Tony? Got a minute? She glanced around nervously. It's about Morgan. Tony straightened, his expression hardening. Unless her car needs work, I'm not interested. She's living in that old apartment complex on Wilson Street. Lisa pressed on. You know, the one with all the code violations? She can't get approved for anything better because her reputation's shot? Tony's laugh was cold. Funny how actions have consequences. Lisa twisted her hands. She lost her real estate license. Apparently, some clients complained about her behavior with their husbands during house showings. Let me guess. Private showings? Tony started cleaning his tools with methodical precision. Sounds like a pattern. She tried calling Jack, but his numbers disconnected. His wife found out, and Lisa. Tony's voice cut through her rambling. Why are you telling me this? Because she's falling apart. Lisa's voice cracked. She drinks all day, barely eats. Yesterday, I saw her at the grocery store wearing the same clothes as 3 days ago. Tony placed his wrench back in its spot with deliberate care. And that's my problem, Hal. You destroyed her life. No. Tony turned his eyes hard. She destroyed her life. Every lie, every betrayal, every time she spread her legs for Jack. Those were her choices. I just made sure everyone knew about them. She's talking about moving back in with her parents in Dallas. Running away. Tony shook his head. Typical Morgan. When things get tough, she looks for someone else to save her. The shop phone rang, interrupting their conversation. Tony answered it, his voice shifting to professional mode. Marshall's Auto Repair. Yes, Mr. Rodriguez. Your fleet's scheduled for next Tuesday. He turned his back on Lisa. We've expanded our services since last time. Let me tell you about our new maintenance packages. Lisa stood there for a moment longer, then left without another word. Through the window, Tony watched her drive away in her perfectly maintained SUV, the one he'd been servicing for years at a discount because of Morgan. Mike approached cautiously. You okay, boss? Better than okay. Tony smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just thinking about karma. That evening, Tony drove home past Morgan's new apartment building. The place was a far cry from their former home. Peeling paint, broken shutters, cars on blocks in the parking lot. Through a ground floor window, he caught a glimpse of a familiar figure sitting alone in a dimly lit room. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I miss you. Please talk to me. Tony deleted the message without responding and blocked the number. It wasn't the first time she'd tried reaching out from a new phone, and it wouldn't be the last at AT home. He sorted through his mail, pausing at an envelope from his lawyer. Inside was confirmation that Morgan's final attempt to appeal the divorce settlement had been rejected. Along with it was a note about her mounting legal fees. The doorbell rang. Tony opened it to find Morgan's mother, Patricia, standing on his porch. She'd aged years in the past few months, her once perfect appearance showing signs of strain. Anthony, please. Her voice trembled. She's not eating. She lost her job, her friends, everything. That's what happens when you're exposed as a cheater. Tony leaned against the doorframe. Shouldn't you be having this conversation with Jack? Oh, wait, he's too busy saving his marriage and career to care about his former mistress. She made a mistake. A mistake. Tony's voice rose. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. She made conscious choices, Patricia. Every time she lied about working late. Every time she met him at that hotel. Every time she let him into our bed. Patricia flinched. She's still my daughter. Then you deal with her. I'm done. Tony started closing the door. And Patricia? Next time she needs someone to blame for her problems, tell her to look in a mirror. After shutting the door, Tony poured himself a whiskey and sat in his home office. The room, once filled with photos of his life with Morgan, now displayed his business achievements, awards, certificates, news articles about his expanding company. His phone lit up with another text, this one from Mike. Saw Morgan at Joe's bar. She's pretty wasted, making a scene about you. Tony replied with a simple, not my problem, before silencing his phone. He had an early meeting tomorrow with a potential new client, a luxury car dealership looking to outsource their maintenance work. Life was moving forward, expanding, improving. Meanwhile, Morgan's world had shrunk to a shabby apartment and a bar stool at Joe's. Her designer clothes replaced by whatever she could afford on unemployment. The next morning, Tony pulled into a shop's parking lot just as the sun was rising. The sign above the door gleamed in the early light. Marshall's Auto Repair, now servicing fleet vehicles. The new logo and expansion plans were his alone, no trace of the life he'd shared with Morgan inside. He found a handwritten note that had been slipped under the door. He recognized Morgan's increasingly unsteady handwriting. I have nothing left. Are you happy now? You got what you wanted. I'm completely alone. Even Jack won't return my calls. My own parents can barely look at me. Is this enough punishment? Please, Tony. I'm drowning here. Tony crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. Morgan was right about one thing. She had nothing left. But that had been her choice, not his. He'd simply made sure she couldn't hide from the consequences. The morning light streamed through the shop windows as Tony prepared for another successful day. In a few hours, he'd meet with the dealership executives, expanding his business even further. Meanwhile, somewhere in a rundown apartment, Morgan was waking up to another day of facing exactly what her choices had cost her. The new gym membership hadn't been Tony's idea. Mike had practically dragged him there one morning before work, insisting he needed something beyond the shop to focus on. Can't spend every waking hour with engines, boss, Mike had said. Gotta rebuild yourself too. Now, 6 months after the divorce, Tony's reflection in the gym mirror showed the results of that decision. His shoulders were broader, his waist trimmer, the physical labor of his work enhanced by dedicated training. Looking good, Marshall. Dave, one of the regular morning crew, called out. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Tony racked his weights, wiping sweat from his face. Just putting in the work, Dave. Like anything else worth doing. Speaking of work, Dave lowered his voice. Heard about Morgan getting fired from Wilson Real Estate. My wife says she showed up drunk to an open house. Not my problem anymore. Tony checked his watch. Got a meeting with that luxury dealership chain today. They're talking about exclusive service contracts for 3 locations. Dave whistled. Moving up in the world, huh? Bet Morgan's kicking herself now. If she is, she can kick herself in that roach-infested apartment she's living in. Tony grabbed his gym bag. See you tomorrow? At the shop, the changes were even more evident. New equipment lined the walls. 3 additional service bays had been added, and a sleek reception area welcomed corporate clients. The sign outside now read Marshall's Automotive Solutions, a subtle but significant upgrade from the old repair shop designation. Mike met him at the door, excitement evident in his face. Boss, you're not going to believe this. Remember that fleet contract we bid on last month? The shipping company? Tony unlocked his office. What about it? They're not just giving us their Houston fleet. Mike grinned. They want us to handle Dallas and Austin too. Said our reputation for reliability sealed the deal. Tony sat at his desk, allowing himself a small smile. Reputation matters, doesn't it? Speaking of which, heard anything about our former friend Jack lately? Mike's grin widened. Word is his wife took him for everything in the divorce. Board position, country club membership, even that precious Mercedes. Guess karma's real after all. The morning passed in a blur of meetings and paperwork. Tony had just finished signing the new fleet contract when his phone buzzed. Morgan's father's name appeared on the screen. Mr. Martinez, Tony answered coolly. What can I do for you? Anthony, this has gone far enough. The older man's voice was strained. Morgan's talking about moving to California. Says she needs a fresh start. Sounds like a good idea. Far away from here. She can't even afford the bus ticket. Everything she had is gone. Her career, her savings, her dignity. Tony leaned back in his chair. Funny how consequences work, isn't it? Kind of like how she thought nothing of destroying our marriage. She's seeing a therapist now, Mr. Martinez pressed. Working on her issues. She knows she made terrible mistakes. Mistakes? Tony cut him off. Let me tell you about mistakes. A mistake is taking a wrong turn. A mistake is overcooking dinner. What Morgan did was make choices. Deliberate, calculated choices to betray everything we built together. But this destruction of her life was her own doing. Tony's voice hardened. I just made sure everyone knew exactly who she was. Now, unless you're interested in a fleet maintenance contract, we're done here. After hanging up, Tony walked through his shop, observing the busy mechanics and steady stream of customers. The business was thriving, expanding beyond what Morgan had ever seen during their marriage. Every success felt like a vindication. That evening, he met his new business partners at Morton's Steakhouse, the same restaurant where he and Morgan had celebrated their last anniversary. The maitre d' recognized him. Mr. Marshall, your usual table? Not tonight, James. Tony gestured to his guests. We'll need the private dining room. As they discussed expansion plans over aged whiskey and prime steaks, Tony caught a glimpse of Morgan through the restaurant's front window. She was walking past, her designer clothes replaced by worn jeans and a faded blouse, her once perfect hair now dull and unkempt. She paused, looking in at the life she'd thrown away. Their eyes met for a moment through the glass. Tony raised his whiskey glass in a mock toast before turning back to his conversation about opening a new location in Dallas later that night. Driving home in his new truck, a purchase that would have been impossible during his marriage due to Morgan's spending habits, Tony passed by Joe's bar. Morgan's car, now sporting dents and a mismatched door, sat in the parking lot, his phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. She's hitting rock bottom, Tony. Spends every night here drowning her sorrows. Today she was crying about how Jack changed his number again. Tony deleted the message without responding. He had an early morning training session at the gym, followed by meetings with potential investors. His life was moving forward, expanding, improving. The next day at the gym, he overheard two women discussing Morgan while he was doing his cool-down stretches. Can you believe she tried to get her old job back? The first woman shook her head. After what she did with those clients' husbands? I heard she's working at that discount clothing store now, her friend replied, folding the same kinds of designer clothes she used to wear. Tony moved to the weight rack, adding more plates than usual. Each rep felt like another victory, another step further from the life he'd shared with Morgan. Mike was waiting at the shop when Tony arrived, fresh from his workout. Looking sharp, boss. Mike handed him a coffee. Ready for the investor meeting? Tony straightened his tie, catching his reflection in the shop window. The man looking back bore little resemblance to the one Morgan had betrayed. Stronger, more confident, successful on his own terms. More than ready, he replied, unlocking the door. Time to show them exactly what Marshall's Automotive can do. Inside his office, Tony found another note that had been slipped under the door. Morgan's handwriting was shaky. I see you everywhere in our old restaurants, in the stores where I used to shop, in the face of every happy couple. You've won, Tony. You've completely destroyed me. Was it worth it? Tony dropped the note in his shredder without a second glance. He had investments to discuss, expansions to plan, a future to build. Morgan's descent into misery was her own doing. He'd simply made sure she couldn't hide from the consequences of her choices. 8 months after the divorce, Tony walked into Henderson's grocery, his mind on the custom car restoration project waiting at his shop. The vintage Mustang represented everything his business had become. High-end, exclusive, profitable. A far cry from the simple repair work he'd done during his marriage. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as he navigated the familiar aisles. He'd shopped here throughout his marriage, usually rushing to grab whatever items Morgan had forgotten for her dinner parties. Now he moved at his own pace, selecting ingredients for the meals he'd learned to cook for himself. Then he turned down the coffee aisle and stopped short. Morgan stood there, studying the prices on generic brands. A far cry from the premium coffee she'd insisted on during their marriage. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Her designer clothes had been replaced by worn jeans and a faded blouse. Her once perfect hair hung limp and unwashed. Tony considered turning around, but that wasn't his style. He never backed down, never ran. He continued down the aisle, his footsteps echoing on the linoleum. Morgan's head snapped up at the sound. Her eyes widened, showing dark circles that makeup couldn't quite hide. She clutched her shopping basket tighter, its meager contents reflecting her new reality. "Tony?" Her voice trembled. I didn't expect to see you here. It's a public place." He reached past her for his preferred brand of coffee, noting how she flinched at his proximity. "You look good." Morgan's eyes traveled over his improved physique, the confident set of his shoulders, the expensive watch that had replaced their anniversary gift. "Really good. Jim does that." Tony dropped the coffee in his cart. "So does sleeping well at night." Morgan's face crumpled slightly. "Tony, I'm sorry. I made a mistake." "A mistake?" He turned to face her fully. "Let's talk about mistakes, Morgan. A mistake is burning dinner. A mistake is missing a turn. What you did, that was a choice. Multiple choices, made over and over again." "I know." Tears welled in her eyes. "I know that now. I've lost everything. My job, my friends, my dignity. Even Jack." Yes, Jack." Tony's smile was cold. "How is the happy family man?" "Oh, wait. You wouldn't know? Would you? Since his wife made him change his number." Morgan wiped at her eyes with a shaking hand. "I'm seeing a therapist, working on myself, trying to understand why I spread your legs for another man in our bed." Tony's voice carried just enough to make nearby shoppers turn their heads. "Save the therapy talk. You didn't need therapy to decide to cheat. You don't need it to live with the consequences. Please." Morgan stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I'm drowning here. I can barely afford rent. I'm working retail. She gestured helplessly at her basket of generic brands and discount items. "This isn't me. Actually, it is you." Tony's voice was matter-of-fact. "This is exactly who you are without someone else to leech off of. Without the lifestyle my work provided while you were busy screwing around." A woman with a cart passed by, doing a poor job of hiding her interest in their conversation. Morgan's face flushed with shame. "I made a mistake," she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "No, Morgan." Tony shook his head. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. Now live with it." He turned away, pushing his cart toward the checkout. Behind him, he heard a choked sob, but he didn't look back. Morgan had chosen her path. Now she could walk it alone to the register. Tony caught his reflection in the security mirror. Confident, successful, strong. 8 months ago, he discovered his wife's betrayal in their bed. Today, he was building an automotive empire while she struggled to afford generic coffee outside. The Houston sun beat down on the parking lot. Tony loaded his groceries into his new truck, the one he'd bought to celebrate landing the dealership contract. From the corner of his eye, he saw Morgan emerge from the store, clutching her single plastic bag of cheap necessities. She paused, looking in his direction, but Tony was already sliding behind the wheel. He had a custom Mustang waiting at his shop, a business empire to build, a life to live. Morgan was nothing more than a cautionary tale, a reminder of why loyalty mattered. The drive back to his shop took him past familiar landmarks. The hotel where Morgan had met Jack, the restaurants where they'd celebrated anniversaries, the church where they'd exchanged vows she'd so easily broken. Each place held memories, but they no longer had power over him. Mike was waiting at the shop, examining the Mustang's engine. "How's she looking?" Tony asked, setting his groceries in his office. "Better than Morgan, from what I hear." Mike wiped his hands on a rag. "Lisa says she's taking the bus to Dallas next week, moving in with her parents." Tony nodded, unsurprised. Running away. Typical Morgan, always looking for someone else to fix her problems. "You really never going to forgive her?" "Nothing to forgive." Tony ran his hand along the Mustang's pristine bodywork. "Forgiveness is for mistakes. She made choices. Now she gets to live with them." The afternoon sun streamed through the shop windows, glinting off the Mustang's fresh paint. Tony stood there for a moment, taking in everything he'd built. The expanded business, the new contracts, the reputation for excellence. All of it earned through hard work and integrity, the very things Morgan had thrown away for cheap thrills with Jack. Later that evening, Tony stood in his backyard, watching the sunset. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Morgan's latest attempt to reach him. Saw you today. You've done well for yourself. I know now what I threw away. I'll never forgive myself. Leaving for Dallas tomorrow. Goodbye, Tony. He deleted the message without responding and blocked the number. Inside his house. Earned through his work, he poured himself a whiskey and walked into his home office. The wall of achievements had grown. Business awards, news articles about Marshall's automotive solutions, photos of restored classic cars that didn't owe traces remained of his life with Morgan. She destroyed their marriage with her choices, and now she would live with the consequences. Tony had rebuilt himself, stronger and more successful than ever. The betrayal hadn't destroyed him. It had revealed his true strength. While Morgan fled to Dallas, running from the wreckage of her choices, Tony stood triumphant in the life he'd built from the ashes of her betrayal. He raised his glass to his reflection in the window, a silent toast to the man he'd become. The man who'd faced betrayal head-on and emerged victorious. The man who'd shown Morgan exactly what she'd thrown away. The sun set on Houston, painting the sky in shades of victory.